My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of my late father's antique oak desk, watching my sister Vanessa's perfectly manicured fingers slide the final inheritance document across the polished surface toward our family attorney. She had no idea that tucked safely in a Swiss bank vault sat an account containing $67 million. Money our father had entrusted to me alone during my final video call from Kandahar, 3 days before the IED blast that nearly ended my life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments below. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've faved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Riverside Estate Library, casting long shadows across the faces of the dozen family members assembled for the reading of Richard Hartwell's will. My father, war hero, self-made real estate mogul, the man who'd built an empire from nothing and raised his daughters to value honor above all else. At least, that's what I'd believed. As you can all see, Vanessa announced, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy as she addressed our assembled relatives, our beloved father left the primary estate, including this property, the downtown commercial holdings, and the liquid assets, to be divided between his children. However, given Juliet's condition and her extended absence during father's final years, we've made some necessary adjustments. My jaw clenched. Condition. As if serving 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic was some kind of character flaw. I stood near the back of the room in my dress uniform, the fabric still crisp despite the humidity of this Georgia August afternoon. The bronze star on my chest felt heavy. My right leg throbbed where the prosthetic connected to what remained of my knee. A constant reminder of the price I'd paid, while Vanessa had been busy repositioning herself as father's sole caretaker. Juliet was overseas when father's health declined. My Aunt Diane murmured to her husband, just loud enough for me to hear. Vanessa practically lived here the last 2 years. It's only natural she'd be more involved in estate matters. Natural. The word stung like shrapnel. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments below. And if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow we've saved something extra special for you. I'm Juliet Hartwell, 33 years old, and for the past 11 years, I've served my country as a United States Army medic, rising to the rank of captain. I've stitched wounds in dusty field hospitals, held dying soldiers' hands as they took their last breaths, and learned to function on 3 hours of sleep while mortar rounds shook the walls around me. I'd missed my mother's funeral because I was in a combat zone. I'd missed my father's 75th birthday, his 80th, and ultimately his last 6 months on Earth because duty called, and the Hartwell family had always answered. My father understood. During our final video call, his face gaunt from the cancer ravaging his body, he looked directly into the camera with those steel gray eyes and said, "Jules, what I'm about to tell you stays between us until the time is right. Your sister doesn't understand sacrifice. She never has, but you do." That conversation had taken place in a secure communications room at Bagram Airfield, 3 days before my convoy hit the IED that shattered my leg, killed 2 of my soldiers, and sent me home in a medical transport with a Purple Heart and a long road to recovery ahead. Now, 8 months later, I stood in my childhood home watching my older sister systematically erase me from our family legacy. The downtown properties, Vanessa continued, consulting a leather portfolio, generated approximately $2.3 million in rental income last year. The Riverside estate is valued at $4.8 million. Combined with father's investment portfolio and liquid assets, we're looking at a total estate value of roughly $12 million. She paused for effect, her emerald eyes sweeping the room before landing on me with what I can only describe as predatory satisfaction. Given Juliet's situation, her injuries, her ongoing VA treatments, her need for specialized care, and considering my role as father's primary caretaker during his final years, we've made some necessary adjustments. The room erupted in murmurs, some shocked, others nodding in what appeared to be agreement. My cousin Thomas actually smiled, no doubt calculating how this might benefit him, given his close relationship with Vanessa. Revised? I spoke for the first time, my voice cutting through the chatter like a scalpel. I don't recall Father mentioning any revisions during our conversations. Vanessa's expression shifted to one of practiced patience, the look she'd perfected during her years as a pharmaceutical sales representative, all surface warmth masking calculated manipulation. Jules, you were halfway around the world. You weren't here for the difficult conversations, the late-night hospital visits, the decisions about care facilities and treatments. Father and I discussed everything thoroughly. He understood that I'd earned a larger share through my dedication. Mr. Patterson, I addressed the family attorney directly, a distinguished man in his 60s, who'd handled Hartwell legal matters for 30 years. What date was this revision executed? He cleared his throat uncomfortably, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The codicil was signed 6 weeks before your father's passing, Captain Hartwell. I can assure you it was properly witnessed and—
6 weeks before his death? I interrupted, my medical training automatically calculating timelines. When he was on heavy pain medication. When the hospice notes, which I've reviewed, indicate he was experiencing significant cognitive impairment. Vanessa's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of something cold and calculating crossing her features before she recovered. How dare you imply that I would take advantage of Father during his illness? I cared for him when you couldn't be bothered to come home. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. My Uncle Robert, Father's younger brother and the family's moral compass, frowned deeply but said nothing. Couldn't be bothered? The words came out quieter than I intended, but everyone in the room heard them. I was treating casualties in a combat zone. I was saving lives while you were apparently revising inheritance documents? Ladies, please, Mr. Patterson interjected. This is neither the time nor the place for, no, let's have this conversation. Vanessa stood, her designer dress immaculate, her posture perfect. Everything about her screamed success, sophistication, control. Juliet, we all respect your service. We're proud of what you've done. But the reality is that Father needed someone here, present, making decisions, managing his affairs. You made your choice to prioritize your military career. That came with consequences. The manipulation was masterful. She'd positioned herself as the dutiful daughter while painting me as the absent soldier who'd abandoned family obligations. I could see it working on several faces around the room, the subtle nods, the sympathetic glances in Vanessa's direction. What none of them knew, what Vanessa certainly didn't know, was that Father had seen through her years ago. The Swiss account, established through a private wealth management firm during his years building international real estate partnerships, contained the true bulk of his fortune, $67 million, accumulated quietly over decades, hidden from public record, protected by Swiss banking privacy laws, money he'd made from a series of brilliant investments in emerging markets, kept separate from his domestic holdings, specifically to protect it from creditors, lawsuits, and apparently from daughters who valued inheritance over integrity. Father told me, he'd said during that final video call, his voice weak but certain, that true wealth isn't measured in properties or portfolios, it's measured in character. Vanessa has always confused the two. When the time comes, you'll understand why I've arranged things this way. The account information is in the safety deposit box at First National, Box 447. The key is in my desk, hidden in the false bottom of the left drawer. But Jules, his eyes intensified, don't reveal it until you're certain. until you've seen who people truly are when they think they've won. I'd thought about those words constantly during my recovery, during the painful physical therapy sessions, during the long nights when phantom pains from my missing leg kept me awake. I'd wondered what he meant by when they think they've won. Now, watching Vanessa orchestrate this performance, I understood perfectly. "I'm not contesting the will," I said calmly, and watched relief flash across Vanessa's face. "Yet." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat again. "Captain Hartwell, if you have concerns about the codicil's validity, there are proper legal channels." "I'm aware of the channels. I'm also aware that Father was a meticulous man who documented everything. I'd like to review his personal papers, his communications from those final weeks. Surely that's reasonable." Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "His papers are being archived. It will take time to—" "I have time," I said simply. "I'm on medical leave for another 6 months. Plenty of time to ensure everything was handled appropriately." The tension in the room was palpable now. My Aunt Diane whispered something to my uncle. Thomas's smile had vanished. Even Mr. Patterson looked uncomfortable, as though he suddenly realized there might be complexities he hadn't considered. "This is absurd," Vanessa snapped, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Father made his wishes clear. I won't have you dragging this family through some drawn-out legal battle because you're bitter about choices you made." "Choices I made," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You mean like choosing to serve my country? Like choosing to save lives? Like choosing honor over inheritance?" I took a step forward, my prosthetic leg clicking softly against the hardwood floor, a sound that suddenly seemed very loud in the silent room. Father taught us that character is revealed in crisis. I learned that lesson in Afghanistan. Where did you learn yours, Vanessa? The question hung in the air as the afternoon sun shifted into darker shadow. I could see the calculation happening behind my sister's eyes. The assessment of whether I was truly a threat or just a wounded soldier grasping at straws. She had no idea that the real battle hadn't even begun. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The path that led me to that library confrontation began 11 years earlier, in a sweltering June morning in 2013, when I stood in this same house and told my father I was enlisting in the Army. I was 22. Fresh out of nursing school at Emory University, with job offers from 3 prestigious Atlanta hospitals sitting on my desk. Vanessa, then 27 and already climbing the corporate ladder at PharmaCorp, looked at me like I'd announced plans to join a cult.
"The military?" she'd said, her voice dripping with disbelief. We were in the kitchen, the same kitchen where our mother had taught us to bake bread, where we'd done homework at the counter, where family decisions had always been made over coffee. "Jules, you have a nursing degree from a top program. You could be making 6 figures at Piedmont Hospital in 2 years. Why would you throw that away?" But it was my father's reaction I cared about. Richard Hartwell sat at the head of the kitchen table, his reading glasses perched on his nose, the morning paper spread before him. He'd served in Vietnam, came home with shrapnel scars and demons he rarely discussed. He understood what I was choosing in a way Vanessa never could. "The Army needs medics," I'd said simply. "Good ones. People are dying because of inadequate field care. I can make a difference there." Vanessa had laughed. Actually laughed. "Make a difference? Jules, you're not going to save the world. You're going to waste your education in some desert treating bullet wounds when you could be here building a real career, a real life." My father had folded his paper carefully, removed his glasses, and looked at me with those penetrating gray eyes. "When do you leave for basic training?" 6 weeks, I'd replied. "Fort Sam Houston in Texas." He'd nodded once, a gesture of understanding that meant more than any words could. "Your grandfather served in Korea, your great-grandfather in World War II. The Hartwells answer when called." Then he'd turn to Vanessa. "There are many kinds of success in this world. Your sister has chosen service. That deserves respect, not ridicule. Vanessa had left the kitchen in a huff, and I'd learned later she'd spent the next hour on the phone with Aunt Diane, complaining about my reckless decision and how it would reflect on the family. Basic training had been brutal. The physical demands pushed me beyond limits I didn't know I had, but I thrived in the structure, the mission clarity, the sense of purpose. By the time I completed advanced individual training at Fort Sam Houston and earned my combat medic certification, I knew I'd made the right choice. My first deployment came in 2014, Afghanistan, Helmand Province. I was 23 years old and terrified, though I'd never have admitted it. The forward operating base was a collection of fortified structures surrounded by miles of hostile terrain. The medical station where I worked consisted of a converted shipping container equipped with basic surgical supplies and equipment that would have been considered outdated in any American hospital. But we made it work. We always made it work. I still remember the first soldier I lost, Private Marcus Chen, 19 years old, from Sacramento. IED blast, massive internal bleeding. I worked on him for 47 minutes, my hands covered in his blood, my team doing everything humanly possible. It wasn't enough. As his vitals flatlined, I understood for the first time what my father had meant about the cost of service. I called home when I could, though communications were limited and unreliable. My father always answered, always asked thoughtful questions about my work. Vanessa, when she bothered to take my calls, would update me on her latest promotion or her new downtown condo or her engagement to a cardiothoracic surgeon named Preston Whitmore. Preston just made partner at his practice, she'd told me during one call, her voice crackling over the terrible connection. We're thinking a spring wedding. You'll be able to come home for it, won't you? I'd been in the middle of a 72-hour shift, having treated 11 casualties in the past day alone. I don't know what my leave schedule will be, I'd said honestly. The silence that followed spoke volumes. Right, of course, your schedule. The disappointment in her voice was palpable. Well, we'll try to work around your commitments. I'd missed the wedding. 3 days before I was supposed to fly home, a massive offensive operation launched, resulting in the largest influx of casualties our base had seen in months. I spent that entire week in the medical station, sleeping in 20-minute increments, living on coffee and adrenaline. By the time things calmed down enough for me to leave, Vanessa's wedding was over. She'd sent me exactly 3 photos via email. No phone call, no understanding. Just a terse message. Missed having you here. Preston's family thought it was strange that my only sister couldn't make time for my wedding. My father had called separately. She'll come around, he'd assured me. She doesn't understand yet what you're doing over there, but she will. I'd wanted to believe him. My second deployment came in 2016, this time to Iraq. By then, I'd been promoted to sergeant and was leading a team of medics. The work was relentless, trauma after trauma, decisions made in seconds that determined whether someone lived or died. I became efficient, clinical, capable of functioning in chaos that would paralyze most people. But the cost was accumulating in ways I didn't fully recognize. I stopped calling home as often. When I did, conversations felt increasingly disconnected. Vanessa would talk about her work, her new house, her investment portfolio. I'd talk about what? The soldier whose leg I amputated on a dirt floor with inadequate anesthesia? The nightmares that woke me 3 times a night? The worlds we inhabited had become incompatible. Our mother died in 2017, a sudden stroke while I was at Al Assad Air Base. I got the news from a Red Cross notification, processed through military channels with bureaucratic efficiency. By the time I was granted emergency leave and made it back to Georgia, the funeral was over. They'd held it without me because, as Vanessa explained, we couldn't delay everything just because you were overseas.
I'd stood in front of our mother's grave alone, in my dress uniform, and understood for the first time how deeply the distance had grown between my sister and me. My father had hugged me tight that day, something he rarely did.
Your mother understood, he'd said quietly. She was proud of you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But Vanessa had already begun crafting a different narrative, one where I'd chosen duty over family, where my absence was abandonment rather than service. My third deployment, beginning in 2019, took me back to Afghanistan. By then, I was a staff sergeant, 30 years old, running a field hospital at Bagram Airfield. The work was consuming, but I was good at it. Really good. I developed new protocols for treating blast injuries, written training manuals that were being adopted across combat medical units, saved countless lives. The Army recognized my contributions. The Bronze Star came after I spent 16 hours treating casualties during a particularly brutal attack, refusing to leave my post even when rockets were hitting nearby structures. The commendation letter cited extraordinary heroism and selfless service under fire. I'd called my father to tell him about the medal. His voice had been thick with emotion. Your grandfather would be so proud, Jules. I'm so proud. Is Vanessa there? I'd asked. I'd like to tell her. She's busy with a work thing, he'd said, and I'd heard the lie in his voice. She'd been there. She just hadn't wanted to talk to me. The distance between my sister and me had become a chasm by then, but I told myself it didn't matter. I had my mission, I had soldiers depending on me, I had purpose. What I didn't have was any idea that my father's health was deteriorating. He'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in early 2023, but he'd specifically instructed everyone not to tell me. I only found out 6 months into his diagnosis when Uncle Robert, unable to bear the deception any longer, sent me a carefully worded email that made me understand how serious things were. I immediately requested leave. Denied. We were in the middle of a critical operation, and my presence was deemed essential. I tried again 2 months later. Denied again. The military machine didn't stop for personal crises, even terminal ones. So I did what I could from 7,000 miles away. I scheduled video calls with my father through the base's secured communication system. I consulted with his oncologists via email. I researched treatment options during my limited downtime. And I watched my father fade through a computer screen. Don't blame Vanessa too harshly, he'd told me during one of our last calls. His face was gaunt, the cancer having stripped away the robust man I'd known. She's there, caring for me. That matters. I wish I could be there too, I'd said, my voice breaking. You are where you need to be, he replied firmly. But Jules, I need to tell you something important. Something about the estate, about provisions I've made. That was when he'd told me about the Swiss account. About the $67 million he'd accumulated through shrewd international real estate investments over 3 decades, and about his concerns regarding Vanessa's character. He'd watched her these past months, he'd said, his voice weak but clear. She's attentive, yes, but there's a calculation to it. She's positioning herself, making sure everyone sees her devotion. She's already talking about estate planning, about my wishes, about how things should be distributed. He'd paused to catch his breath. I'm not blind to it, Jules. I'm just tired of fighting. Dad, if you want to change the will... He'd interrupted. I don't need to change anything. The domestic will can stand as written. Let her have the properties, the obvious assets. You'll have what matters, what I built for the future, not just the present. The account details are in the safety deposit box at First National. But Jules, his eyes intensified despite his weakness. Don't reveal it immediately. Let things play out. You'll understand why when the time comes. 3 days after that conversation, my convoy hit an IED outside Kandahar. I remember the flash, the sound like the world ending, then nothing. I woke up in a medical transport, my leg gone below the knee, 2 of my soldiers dead, another 3 critically wounded.
The doctors at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany worked miracles to save my life. My father died while I was in surgery for the third time, having never regained consciousness enough to be told what had happened to me. I got the news from Uncle Robert, who'd flown to Germany to be there when I woke up. He went peacefully, Robert had told me, his hand gripping mine. And Jules, he was so proud of you, right till the end. Vanessa hadn't called, hadn't sent a message, nothing. The funeral happened while I was still in recovery at Walter Reed Medical Center, learning to navigate the world with a prosthetic leg. This time, Vanessa hadn't even sent photos, just a brief email. Funeral was beautiful. Dad would have approved. Sorry you couldn't make it. Couldn't make it. As if I'd missed a social engagement rather than my own father's funeral because I'd been blown up in combat.
The months that followed were a blur of physical therapy, pain management, and psychological evaluation. The Army was considering a medical discharge, though I was fighting to remain on active duty. My body was healing, but slowly. The prosthetic leg required constant adjustment. Phantom pains woke me multiple times a night. But through it all, I remembered my father's words. The safety deposit box, the account, the instruction to wait. I'd arrived back in Georgia 2 weeks ago, moving into a temporary apartment near the VA hospital, where I continued outpatient therapy. I'd called Vanessa to let her know I was back. Her response had been cordial, but distant. "Oh, that's nice. We should catch up soon. Things have been so busy with managing Dad's estate." Managing Dad's estate? Not grieving, not mourning, managing. Uncle Robert had been more forthcoming. Over coffee at a diner near the VA hospital, he'd filled me in on what I'd missed. "Your sister has been very involved in estate matters," he'd said carefully. "She's taken control of all the properties, restructured some of the leases, even made some changes to operational procedures at the commercial holdings." Changes? I'd asked. "She doesn't have authority to make changes without me." Robert had looked uncomfortable. "There was a codicil to the will, executed about 6 weeks before your father passed. It gave her more control and a larger share. 70-30 split." The news had hit me like a second explosion. 70-30? Dad wouldn't have. He was very sick at the end. Heavy medications, sometimes confused about dates and times. The hospice notes document significant cognitive impairment in those final weeks. I sat there, processing, while the coffee grew cold in front of me. My father had warned me. He'd seen this coming. "There's a formal will reading scheduled for next week," Robert had continued. "Vanessa insisted on it, wanted the whole family present for the announcement." He'd met my eyes directly. "Jules, I don't like what I've been seeing. Your sister has been spreading a narrative that you abandoned the family, that you chose your career over your father's final days. It's not true, but she's been very convincing." That conversation had prepared me for what was coming, but knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally were vastly different. Now, standing in my father's library, having just watched Vanessa orchestrate her performance, I understood completely why he'd instructed me to wait, to watch, to see who people truly were when they thought they'd won. I'd seen it clearly now. My sister wasn't the devoted daughter she'd portrayed. She was a calculating opportunist who'd seen a dying man as an opportunity to secure her financial future. The question was, what was I going to do about it? As the family members filed out of the library, throwing sympathetic glances at Vanessa and uncertain looks at me, I felt the weight of the safety deposit key in my pocket. I'd retrieved it from my father's desk drawer that morning, before anyone else had arrived. Bucks 447 at First National Bank. Inside it, documentation of $67 million that Vanessa didn't know existed. My father's final lesson was clear. Sometimes you had to let people reveal their true character before you could determine the appropriate response. The revelation was coming.
But not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly what Vanessa had done and how deep her deception ran. I had 6 months of medical leave. 6 months to honor my father's memory by exposing the truth. The battle was just beginning. The morning after the will reading, I woke at 500 hours, muscle memory from years of military routine. My apartment was sparse, furnished with the basics the VA had helped me acquire: a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, and a coffee maker that had become my most valued possession. The prosthetic leg leaned against the nightstand, waiting. I went through my morning routine with mechanical precision. Attach the prosthetic, check the fit, adjust the suspension sleeve, physical therapy exercises, 20 minutes of stretches and strength work, shower, coffee, stare at the stack of documents I'd brought home from the estate attorney's office. My phone buzzed at 0647. Uncle Robert. "You awake?" his text read. "Always," I replied. "Diner? Same place? 8 a.m.? See you there." I arrived early, claiming the same corner booth we'd occupied 2 weeks ago. The place was nearly empty, too late for the early crowd, too early for the breakfast rush. Robert arrived precisely at 8, sliding into the seat across from me with the weary expression of a man who hadn't slept well. "You look like hell," he said, ordering coffee from the waitress. "You're not winning any beauty contests yourself," I replied. He smiled grimly. "Fair enough." He waited until the waitress had poured his coffee and left before continuing. "I spent last night going through some of your father's old files, things he'd asked me to keep for him over the years." I leaned forward. "And?" "Your father was meticulous about documentation. He kept copies of everything: emails, financial statements, medical records." Robert pulled a manila folder from his briefcase, "including communications with Vanessa during his final months." I slid the folder across to me. I opened it carefully, scanning the printed emails inside. They dated from February through July of this year, the period when my father's cancer had progressed from manageable to terminal. The first few were innocuous enough: Vanessa asking about his medication schedule, discussing doctor's appointments, coordinating with hospice services. She sounded like a devoted daughter managing her father's care. But as I read further, the tone shifted. By April, Vanessa was raising questions about estate planning. "Dad, we really need to discuss your wishes for the properties," one email read. "The commercial holdings need proper management structure. Have you thought about putting me on the accounts? It would make everything easier." May brought more pointed suggestions. "I've been thinking about the inheritance structure. Given my years of experience in business and my presence here managing your care, it might make sense to adjust the distribution. Jules has her military career. She's set, but I've dedicated myself to family and to you." The manipulation was subtle, but unmistakable. She was planting seeds, building a case for why she deserved more. June's emails were even more troubling. "Dad, your confusion episodes are getting worse. Yesterday you couldn't remember what year it was. We need to get your affairs in order while you're still lucid enough to make decisions. Mr. Patterson can come by this week with updated documents." I looked up at Robert. He wasn't confused in June. I was video calling with him twice a week. He was sharp, articulate. "I know," Robert interrupted. "I was visiting him regularly too. Yes, he had moments of medication-induced fog, but nothing like what Vanessa was describing in these emails." He tapped the folder. "Keep reading." The emails from July made my blood run cold. Vanessa had begun coordinating with Mr. Patterson about the codicil, suggesting specific language about her role as primary caregiver and the need for adjusted distribution, reflecting the reality of our respective commitments to family. And there, in an email dated July 8th, exactly 6 weeks before my father's death, was the smoking gun.
Mr. Patterson has prepared the codicil as we discussed. I'll have Dad sign it tomorrow afternoon after his 2 p.m. morphine dose when he's comfortable but still coherent enough for the witnesses to confirm capacity. Perfect window. She timed it, I said, my voice hollow. She deliberately waited until he'd had pain medication, but before he was too impaired to sign? That's not the worst part, Robert said quietly. He reached across and flipped to the last page in the folder. Look at who the witnesses were. I scanned the document. The codicil had been witnessed by 2 people, Preston Whitmore, Vanessa's husband, and Diane Crawford, our aunt. Aunt Diane witnessed this? I felt something break inside me. She knew? I talked to her last night, Robert said. She claims Vanessa told her it was just a formality, that your father wanted to recognize her dedication, but that the overall distribution remained fair. Diane says she had no idea it was a 70-30 split. Does Preston know what Vanessa did? Robert's expression darkened. I couldn't get him on the phone, but Jules, there's something else. Something that might explain why Vanessa pushed so hard for this. He pulled out another document, this one a financial statement from PharmaCorp. Vanessa was terminated from her position 8 months ago, some kind of compliance violation. Specifics are buried under an NDA, but the timing lines up with when she suddenly became so devoted to our father's care. The pieces clicked into place with ugly clarity. Vanessa hadn't been acting out of familial devotion. She was desperate, unemployed, and saw my father's terminal illness as an opportunity to secure her financial future. She needed the money, I said flatly. More than that, she needed to establish herself as the primary heir before anyone started asking questions about why a successful pharmaceutical executive was suddenly available to provide full-time care. Robert took a long drink of his coffee. Jules, this is fraud. Elder abuse, possibly. With these emails as evidence, you could contest the codicil. No judge would uphold it. I sat back, processing. The legal path was clear. I could take these documents to a lawyer, file a challenge, expose Vanessa's manipulation. The codicil would be thrown out, the will would revert to its original 50-50 distribution, and justice would be served. But something held me back. My father's words echoed in my memory. Let things play out. You'll understand why when the time comes. I need to think about this, I said finally. Robert looked frustrated. Think about what? You have evidence of... I know what I have, I interrupted gently. But there's more to this than just legal victory. I need to understand the full scope of what she's done. What are you planning? I closed the folder carefully. I'm going to visit the properties, the commercial holdings Dad left. I want to see what management changes Vanessa has been implementing. Robert studied me for a long moment. You're not just building a legal case, are you? You're building something else. My father taught me to be thorough. In combat medicine, you don't treat the symptoms. You diagnose the underlying condition. I need to know exactly what disease we're dealing with before I prescribe treatment. We finished breakfast mostly in silence. As we prepared to leave, Robert grabbed my arm. Jules, be careful. Whatever you're planning, your sister isn't stupid. She's desperate and she's clever. That's a dangerous combination. So am I replied, and I have something she doesn't. What's that? Training and operating behind enemy lines. I spent the rest of that day conducting reconnaissance. My father's commercial holdings consisted of 3 properties in downtown Savannah, a mixed-use building with retail on the ground floor and offices above, a historic warehouse converted to upscale loft apartments, and a small office complex leased primarily to medical practices.
I started with the mixed-use building on River Street. The property manager, a competent woman named Jennifer Torres, who'd worked for my father for 15 years, looked genuinely pleased to see me. "Captain Hartwell," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I heard you were back. I'm so sorry about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you. I wanted to check in, see how things are running. Her expression shifted subtly. Well, that's complicated. Your sister has made some changes recently. Significant ones. Over the next hour, Jennifer walked me through what Vanessa had implemented. She'd renegotiated several lease agreements, not to benefit the tenants or optimize revenue, but to personally profit. A restaurant on the ground floor had been pressured into accepting new terms that included consulting fees, paid directly to Vanessa. An accounting firm on the third floor had been told their lease wouldn't be renewed unless they agreed to provide complimentary financial services to Vanessa personally. It's not illegal exactly, Jennifer explained, her discomfort obvious. The consulting arrangement could be justified as management oversight, but it's not how your father operated. He believed in transparent dealings. How much has she extracted in these consulting fees? She pulled up her records. Approximately $47,000 over the past 4 months, from 4 different tenants. I made careful notes. What about the other properties? Similar patterns. At the warehouse, she convinced 2 tenants to voluntarily upgrade their units, which meant paying for renovations that increased their rent, but that she specified and marked up significantly. She pocketed the difference between actual costs and what she charged them. The office complex told the same story. Vanessa had been systematically extracting money from my father's properties, using her position as a state executor to pressure tenants into arrangements that benefited her personally. Miss Torres, can you document all of this for me? Every transaction, every fee, every change she's implemented. She hesitated. Captain Hartwell, your sister is technically the executor. If she finds out that I've been sharing this information, she won't find out from me. And I promise you, this information will be used to protect these properties and the tenants who lease from them. That's what my father would want. Something in my tone convinced her. I'll have everything compiled by tomorrow. But Captain, be careful. Your sister came by last week asking questions about the property finances. She wanted to know if anyone had been accessing records or asking questions about the management changes. I got the feeling she's worried about something. She should be, I said quietly. That evening, I visited 3 of the affected tenants. Each told similar stories of pressure, implicit threats about lease renewals, and feeling trapped between complying with Vanessa's demands or risking their businesses. Marco Delgado, who ran the Italian restaurant on River Street, was the most forthcoming. Your father, he was fair man, he said, his accent thick but his English clear. Always fair. He say, Marco, you build good business, you pay fair rent, we both do well. But your sister, she come with papers, with demands. She say, I pay her consulting fee, or maybe my lease has problems when renewal time comes. What I do? I have employees, customers, I pay. How much has she taken from you? $12,000 over 3 months. His expression hardened. But is not about money, is about what your father built here. Respect, trust. She break that. I took detailed notes, collected documentation, and promised Marco that things would be addressed. As I walked back to my car, I felt the full weight of what Vanessa had done. She hadn't just stolen from me, she'd corrupted our father's legacy, exploiting the people he'd built relationships with over decades. My phone rang as I walked back to my car. An unknown number. Captain Hartwell? Speaking. This is Rachel Kim from First National Bank. You're listed as an authorized party on Safety Deposit Box 447. You had inquired about access. Yes, I'd like to schedule a time to access the box. We have an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. if that works for you. Perfect. I'll be there. After hanging up, I sat in my car for a long moment. Tomorrow, I would access my father's safety deposit box. I would see the documentation of the $67 million account. The weapon, that would change everything. But tonight, I needed to finish my intelligence gathering. I drove to Vanessa's house, a sprawling colonial in one of Savannah's most exclusive neighborhoods. Preston's cardiothoracic surgery salary, combined with Vanessa's previous pharmaceutical income, had afforded them significant luxury. The house was dark, except for lights in what I knew was Preston's home office. I didn't approach the house. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away and watched. At 9:47 p.m., a Mercedes pulled into their driveway. Vanessa got out, followed by Aunt Diane. They stood in the driveway talking for several minutes. Too far away for me to hear, but their body language was animated, intense. Diane was gesturing emphatically. Vanessa kept shaking her head. Finally, Diane got back in her car and drove away, clearly upset. I made a note. Diane and Vanessa arguing, 9:47 p.m. Diane left distressed. At 10:15 p.m., another car arrived. This one I recognized, Mr. Patterson, the family attorney. He stayed for 37 minutes. When he left, his expression was troubled. I documented everything. Times, visitors, observations. In combat zones, intelligence gathering was patient work. You watched, you documented, you analyzed patterns. You identified vulnerabilities.
Vanessa was meeting with the attorney late at night, just days after the will reading. She was worried about something, preparing for something. She knew I was a threat. She just didn't know how much of one. As I drove back to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Captain Hartwell, this is Jennifer Torres. I compiled those documents you requested, but there's something else. I accessed the property management system tonight and found evidence that records have been altered. Someone deleted transaction histories from August and September. I have backups, but you need to see this. It's worse than I thought. I responded immediately. Send everything to this email address, and Jennifer, back up those files in 3 different locations. Tonight. The response came quickly. Already done. Captain, what has she been doing? I typed back, covering her tracks, but she's too late. Back in my apartment, I spread everything across my small table. Robert's folder of emails, my notes from tenant interviews, property management documents, financial records. A picture was emerging, not just of inheritance theft, but of systematic fraud. Vanessa had been planning this for months. While my father lay dying, she'd been positioning herself to seize control of his entire estate. The codicil was just one piece. She'd also been working to isolate and eliminate evidence of her financial manipulation of the properties. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd assumed I would either accept her narrative or fight a straightforward legal battle over the will. She hadn't anticipated that I would conduct a thorough investigation, that I would build a comprehensive case documenting not just the codicil fraud, but everything else she'd done. My father had been right. You had to let people reveal themselves completely before you could determine the appropriate response. Tomorrow, I would access the safety deposit box, I would confirm the $67 million account, and then the real battle would begin. But tonight, I had one more task. I opened my laptop and began typing a detailed chronology of everything I'd discovered. Every email, every transaction, every conversation. Organized, referenced, documented with military precision. When Vanessa's empire fell, and it would fall, there would be no ambiguity about why. At 0200 hours, I finally closed the laptop. The dossier was complete. Tomorrow would bring the next phase. I lay and died, staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar phantom pains in my missing leg. But alongside the pain was something else. Purpose. Clarity. The same feeling I had in combat when the mission was clear and the objective was righteous. My father had trained me for this battle in ways neither of us had fully understood. He'd taught me about honor, about justice, about the importance of documentation and patience. Vanessa had spent months positioning herself for victory, but she'd been fighting the wrong battle. She'd focused on legal manipulation and financial maneuvering. She'd forgotten that some of us were trained to fight wars. First National Bank opened its doors at 9 a.m. sharp. I was waiting in the parking lot at 8:45, watching employees arrive and unlock the building. The morning was cool for Georgia in August, storm clouds gathering on the horizon, promising afternoon rain. At 9:59, I walked through the heavy glass doors into the marble-floored lobby. The bank had been a fixture in Savannah for a century, one of those institutions that survived economic crashes and cultural shifts through conservative management and deep community roots. My father had banked here for 40 years. Rachel Kim met me at the reception desk, a petite woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a professional demeanor that suggested she'd seen enough in banking to be surprised by very little. "Captain Hartwell, thank you for your service. Your father spoke highly of you." "You knew my father?" "I was his private banker for the last 15 years. He was a remarkable man." She gestured toward a corridor. "Shall we?" She led me through a secured door, down a hallway lined with old photographs of Savannah's historic district, and into the vault area. The safety deposit boxes lined the walls in neat rows, ranging from small envelope-sized boxes to larger ones the size of filing cabinets. Box 447 was medium-sized, located in the lower left quadrant. Rachel inserted the bank's master key, then waited while I used my father's key, the one I'd retrieved from the false bottom of his desk drawer. Both keys turned simultaneously with a satisfying mechanical click. "I'll give you privacy," Rachel said, gesturing to a small viewing room adjacent to the vault. "Take all the time you need. Just let me know when you're finished." I carried the metal box into the viewing room and set it on the table. For a moment, I just stared at it. Whatever was inside would confirm or disprove everything my father had told me during that final video call, would provide the ammunition I needed, or reveal that his cancer-addled mind had been confused after all. I opened the box. Inside were 3 items: a leather portfolio similar to the one containing my childhood drawings, a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting, and a small USB drive. I opened the portfolio first. The top document was a letter from Bergman Private Wealth Management in Zurich, Switzerland, dated 3 weeks before my father's death. It confirmed the existence of account number CH742988163304, currently holding assets totaling $67,247,893.42. $67 million! My hands trembled slightly as I read through the accompanying documents. The account had been established in 1994, initially funded with proceeds from a commercial property sale in Berlin shortly after German reunification. Over the next 30 years, my father had made strategic investments through the Swiss firm, emerging markets in Eastern Europe, early technology companies, carefully selected real estate ventures in developing economies. He'd been brilliant. While maintaining his visible domestic real estate portfolio, he'd been quietly building an international fortune that existed completely outside public record. The Swiss banking privacy laws had kept it invisible to everyone except the most sophisticated forensic accounting investigation. And he'd left it entirely to me. The documentation was meticulous. Power of attorney papers, already executed and notarized, granting me sole authority over the account. A letter from the wealth management firm explaining the access procedures, wire transfer instructions, tax documentation showing that all appropriate Swiss and U.S. tax obligations had been met through careful structuring and reporting. Everything was legal, properly reported, completely legitimate, just invisible to anyone who wasn't looking in exactly the right places. I opened the sealed envelope next. My father's handwriting covered 3 pages of his personal stationery. "My dearest Jules, if you're reading this, I've passed on, and you've found what I left for you. I hope the timing is right, that you've had a chance to see how things played out without this knowledge coloring your perceptions. I established this account 30 years ago, long before you or Vanessa were old enough to understand money or legacy. I did it because I understood that visible wealth attracts attention, claims, lawsuits, and temptations. But wealth that exists quietly, managed carefully, can provide real security for generations. I've watched both my daughters grow into very different women. You chose service, honor, sacrifice, the Hartwell legacy I hope to pass on. Your sister chose ambition, status, acquisition, things I understand but don't admire in the way I admire your path. When I became ill, I saw Vanessa's true character emerge. She was attentive, yes, but calculated.
I could see her positioning herself, thinking about inheritance, viewing my death as a transaction rather than a loss. It saddened me, but it also clarified things. The domestic will divides the visible assets roughly equally. Actually, given the codicil she convinced me to sign during a particularly foggy afternoon, she'll get more. Let her have it. Those properties, that money, it's enough to be comfortable, but not enough to define a life. She'll think she won. But you, my jewels, you get what matters. This account represents not just money, but the wisdom to build wealth quietly, to value substance over appearance, to play a longer game than most people can imagine. Use it wisely. Use it to continue your service in whatever form that takes. Use it to build something meaningful. Use it to help others who, like you, chose honor over easy paths. And if Vanessa's character proves as flawed as I suspect, if she uses her inheritance to manipulate, to hurt others, to corrupt what I built, then use this account to set things right. Not out of revenge, but out of justice. You were always the daughter who understood the difference between those two things. I'm proud of you, Jules. Prouder than I could ever adequately express. Your medals, your service, your sacrifices, they represent everything I hope to instill in my children. You are my true legacy. The USB drive contains documentation of everything: account histories, investment strategies, legal structures. Also some files I compiled regarding your sister's recent activities. I wasn't blind to what she was doing, even at the end. Consider it intelligence for whatever battle comes next. Fight wisely, my warrior daughter. With all my love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, my father's voice clear in every word. He'd known. He'd seen exactly what Vanessa was doing, had predicted exactly how things would unfold, and he'd prepared for it with the same strategic thinking he'd applied to building his fortune. I wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or heartbroken that he'd had to plan for this level of family dysfunction while dying of cancer. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained multiple folders, each meticulously organized. Account documentation, comprehensive records of every transaction, investment, and asset in the Swiss account since its inception. Legal structures, formation documents for various holding companies and trusts that my father had established to manage the international investments. Tax compliance, 30 years of proper reporting and payment documentation proving the account was completely legitimate. Vanessa, evidence collection. This folder made my breath catch. My father had been documenting Vanessa's activities during his final months. Screenshots of emails where she discussed the codicil with Mr. Patterson, records of her job termination from PharmaCorp, even photographs, time-stamped images showing Vanessa bringing documents for him to sign during periods when the hospice notes clearly indicated he was heavily medicated and cognitively impaired. He'd been building a case against his own daughter while dying of cancer. The thought was almost unbearable. The final folder was labeled simply, "For Jules, Strategic Options." Inside was a document outlining 3 potential courses of action. Option 1, reveal everything immediately, confront Vanessa with the Swiss account, contest the codicil using the evidence provided, pursue legal action for elder fraud. Result? Quick resolution, public vindication, but maximum family destruction and potential media circus. Option 2, strategic selective disclosure. Use the evidence to privately force Vanessa to correct her behavior, return fraudulently obtained funds, and properly manage the estate properties. Keep the Swiss account private. Result? Problem solved quietly, family relationships potentially solvable, but Vanessa never fully faces consequences.
Option 3, patient documentation and comprehensive action. Allow Vanessa to continue her activities while thoroughly documenting everything. Build an unassailable case. Then reveal both her fraud and the Swiss account simultaneously in a manner that achieves maximum corrective impact while minimizing collateral damage to innocent parties. Result: complete justice, clear consequences, but requires patience and careful execution. My father had added handwritten notes beside option 3. This is the path I recommend. You're a strategist, Jules. Use those skills. Sometimes the most effective strike comes after thorough reconnaissance. I sat back, processing everything. My father hadn't just left me money. He'd left me a roadmap. He'd anticipated Vanessa's behavior, documented her crimes, and provided me with multiple strategic options for responding. He'd trained me for this battle even from beyond the grave. A knock on the viewing room door interrupted my thoughts. Rachel Kim's voice came through. "Captain Hartwell? Is everything all right? You've been in there for over an hour." I stood, carefully repacking everything into the metal box, except for copies of the key documents, which I loaded onto my laptop. "I'm fine, just finishing up." When I emerged, Rachel was waiting with a concerned expression. "Your father left instructions that if you ever accessed this box, I was to provide you with additional information." She handed me a sealed letter with the bank's letterhead. Inside was a brief note. "Captain Hartwell, your father established a line of credit for you with this institution, secured by assets in his international portfolio. The credit line totals $5 million, available immediately upon request. He specified that you might need liquid resources for strategic purposes, and that normal loan processing timelines might not serve those purposes adequately. If you require access to these funds, please contact me directly. Rachel Kim, Private Banking." $5 million in immediately accessible credit. My father had thought of everything. "Did he explain what these strategic purposes might be?" I asked Rachel. She smiled slightly. "Your father said, and I quote, 'My daughter is a combat medic and a strategist. If she needs rapid access to significant funds, it's because she's fighting a battle that matters. Don't slow her down with bureaucracy.'" Despite everything, I almost laughed. That sounded exactly like him. "Thank you, Miss Kim. I may need to access those funds soon." "I'll be ready when you are." I left the bank at 11:30 a.m., my laptop bag heavier with documentation and possibility. The storm clouds had moved in, and the first drops of rain were falling as I reached my car. My phone showed 6 missed calls, 3 from Vanessa, 2 from Aunt Diane, 1 from Uncle Robert. Vanessa had left a voicemail. "Jules, we need to talk about some property management issues. There are decisions that need to be made, and as executor, I need your input on certain matters. Call me back today, please. It's important." The timing was interesting. Yesterday, I'd been interviewing tenants about her fraudulent schemes. Today, she's suddenly needed my input on property management. She was worried, trying to assess whether I was a threat. Good. Let her worry. I called Uncle Robert first. He answered on the first ring. "How did it go at the bank?" "Exactly as Dad said it would. Everything's documented. Everything's legitimate. And Robert, it's more than he told me. Significantly more." A pause. "How much more?" "Enough to change everything. Enough to make Vanessa's inheritance manipulation completely irrelevant, financially speaking. But that's not the point anymore." "What is the point?" I watched the rain begin to fall harder, drumming against the windshield. Justice. Dad documented everything she did. He saw it all. Robert, even while dying, he was building a case. He left me with 3 strategic options for handling this. I'm going with option 3. Which is patient, comprehensive, devastating. I let her keep going. I document everything. And when I move, it's not just about the will or the inheritance. It's about everything she's done. The elder fraud, the property schemes, the tenant manipulation, all of it. Robert was quiet for a long moment. "That's not just justice, Jules. That's warfare." "I'm trained for warfare,
And this is a battle that needs to be fought, not for me, for Dad's legacy, for the tenants she's exploiting, for everyone he'll suffer if her behavior goes unchallenged. What do you need from me? Keep feeding me information. Keep being the concerned uncle who's worried about family unity. Let Vanessa think you're neutral, but document everything you observe. I can do that. He paused. Jules, your father would be proud and a little terrified. You inherited more than his money. You inherited his strategic mind. I inherited his sense of justice. The strategic mind I developed myself, in places where getting strategy wrong meant people died. After hanging up, I sat in the parking lot for several more minutes, thinking through the next moves. Vanessa wanted to talk about property management. Fine, I'd take that meeting. I'd let her explain her fraudulent schemes while pretending to be cooperative and naive. I'd give her enough rope to hang herself. But first, I needed to talk to Jennifer Torres again. If Vanessa was reaching out for property management, it meant she'd noticed something. Jennifer's document compilation, the tenant interviews, something that had made her nervous. Good. Let her worry.
I called Jennifer. Has anyone contacted you in the past 24 hours asking questions about the properties or about me? Your sister called this morning, Jennifer confirmed. Asked if you'd been by, what you'd wanted, whether you'd requested any documentation. I told her you'd just stop by to introduce yourself and see the properties. Didn't mention the financial records. Good. Did she seem satisfied? No. She seemed suspicious. She asked if any tenants had complained about the new management arrangements. I told her everything was running smoothly. Jennifer, she's going to dig deeper. She's going to start covering her tracks more aggressively. Can you make backup copies of everything right now? Not just what you've already compiled for me, but every financial record, every email, every document related to property management over the past 6 months? I can do that, but Captain Hartwell, if she figures out what I'm doing, she won't. And even if she does, you're protected. You're documenting potentially fraudulent activity. That's not disloyalty, it's due diligence. But Jennifer, this is important. Don't confront her. Don't resist if she makes changes. Just document everything and send it to me. Understood. Captain, what are you planning? I watched the rain fall, thinking about my father's letter, about option 3, about the comprehensive case I was building. I'm planning to make sure that when this is over, no one will ever question what kind of person my sister really is, or what kind of person my father was. After we hung up, I composed a carefully worded text to Vanessa. Sorry I missed your calls. Was at a medical appointment. Happy to discuss property management issues. One works for you. Her response came within 30 seconds. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Riverside estate. We need to discuss several urgent matters. Tomorrow afternoon, at the family estate where this had all started, where she'd orchestrated the will reading and her performance victory. She was choosing the battleground, thinking she had home field advantage. She had no idea I'd been training for this fight my entire adult life, that I'd learned strategy in places where mistakes cost lives, that I'd developed patience under conditions that would break most people. She thought she was dealing with a wounded soldier who'd been overseas while she manipulated our dying father. She was wrong. I was a combat veteran with $67 million in resources, comprehensive documentation of her crimes, and a strategic mind that had been forged in fire. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't be about property management. It would be about gathering more intelligence, observing her methods, letting her believe she was winning. The real battle would come later, when I'd built an unassailable case, when every avenue of escape was closed, when the truth was so thoroughly documented that no amount of manipulation could obscure it. My father had taught me that justice required patience. The army had taught me that victory required preparation. Vanessa was about to learn that some battles are lost long before the first shot is fired. I started the car and drove through the rain toward my apartment, my mind already planning tomorrow's tactical approach. In combat, we called it reconnaissance in force.
engaging with the enemy to gather intelligence while maintaining the initiative. Tomorrow, I would be the concerned, cooperative sister, the wounded veteran who just wanted family unity, the naive younger daughter who didn't understand complex financial arrangements. I would play that role perfectly while documenting every lie, every manipulation, every piece of evidence that would eventually destroy her carefully constructed facade. The war had begun. Vanessa just didn't know it yet. The Riverside estate looked different in daylight without the crowd of relatives and the performance of the will reading. I arrived at 1:55 p.m., 5 minutes early, enough to appear punctual, but not eager. The rain from yesterday had cleared, leaving the August air thick and humid, the kind of heat that made my prosthetic uncomfortable where it connected to the residual limb. Vanessa's Mercedes was already in the circular driveway, parked in the exact spot where our father used to leave his Lincoln. A small detail, but telling. She was already inhabiting his space, his role, his authority. I knocked on the front door rather than using my key. This was her territory now, or so she believed. Better to let her maintain that illusion. She answered quickly, dressed in casual elegance, linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile was practiced, warm but with an edge I'd learned to recognize during our childhood, the smile that appeared when she wanted something. "Thank you for coming, Jules." She stepped aside to let me enter. "I made iced tea. It's hot today." The formality was deliberate. We were in negotiation mode, not sisterhood. Fine by me. She led me to the library where the will reading had taken place. The same oak desk, the same leather chairs, the same afternoon light filtering through the tall windows. She'd staged this carefully, putting me back in the space where she'd orchestrated her victory, reminding me of the power dynamic she thought she'd established. "So," I said, accepting the glass of tea and sitting in one of the guest chairs rather than behind the desk, "you mentioned urgent property management issues." Vanessa settled into the chair behind our father's desk, his chair, and opened a leather portfolio. "Several things have come up that require discussion. First, there are some maintenance issues at the River Street property. The HVAC system needs replacing. The estimate is $47,000. As executor, I can authorize repairs up to $50,000, but I wanted to keep you informed."
That's considerate, I replied neutrally. What does Jennifer Torres recommend? A micro-expression flickered across Vanessa's face, surprised that I'd been in contact with the property manager, quickly masked. Jennifer agrees it's necessary. The system is failing and we can't risk tenant complaints during the summer heat. Makes sense. What else? She consulted her notes. There's also the matter of the warehouse property. 2 tenants want to renew their leases early, which is good news, but they're requesting updated amenities as part of the renewal, which means capital improvements. What kind of improvements? Upgraded kitchens, new flooring, fresh paint, the usual. I've gotten estimates from contractors. It would cost about $35,000 per unit, but we could raise the rent by $400 monthly, which pays for itself in under 8 years. The math was sound, but I knew from Jennifer's documentation that Vanessa had been marking up these improvements and pocketing the difference. The actual contractor quotes were probably closer to $20,000 per unit. "Have you shared the contractor estimates with Jennifer?" I asked casually. Another flicker. "Not yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first, since it involves capital expenditure. I'd like to see the estimates before we proceed, and I'd like Jennifer to review them as well. She's been managing these properties for 15 years. She'd know if the pricing is competitive." Vanessa's smile tightened slightly. "Of course. Transparency is important. I'll forward everything to both of you." She wouldn't, of course, or she'd create doctored estimates. But the request put her on notice that I was paying attention to details. "There's one more thing," Vanessa said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "I've been reviewing the property financials more carefully, and I've noticed some irregularities." This was interesting. Was she about to confess? Blame someone else? Or was this a fishing expedition to see if I'd discovered her schemes? What kind of irregularities? Some of the lease agreements have unusual clauses, consulting fees, service charges, arrangements that don't quite match Dad's typical operating procedures. She met my eyes directly. I'm concerned that Jennifer might have been taking advantage of Dad's illness to structure deals that benefit her personally. There it was. She was setting up Jennifer as the fall guy. The audacity was breathtaking. Vanessa had been creating these fraudulent arrangements, and now she was preparing to blame the property manager, a woman who'd worked loyally for our father for 15 years. That's a serious accusation, I said carefully. Do you have evidence? I'm still compiling documentation, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We might need to consider replacing Jennifer if the irregularities are as extensive as I suspect. Before we make any personnel decisions, I'd want to see comprehensive evidence. Jennifer has an excellent track record. Dad trusted her completely. Dad was sick toward the end. He might not have been monitoring things as closely as usual. People take advantage in situations like that. The irony was almost painful. She was describing her own behavior while projecting it on an innocent party. Well, let's review everything thoroughly before we jump to conclusions. I hate to damage someone's reputation based on incomplete information. She studied me for a moment, and I could see her trying to assess whether I was naive or strategic, whether I believed her narrative, or was playing along for my own purposes. You've changed. The military changed you. You're more careful, more analytical. Combat medicine requires precision. Incomplete assessments get people killed. I learned to be thorough. I suppose that's a valuable skill for managing family estates, too. She closed her portfolio. Jules, I want us to be on the same page. I know things have been difficult between us. I know you feel I got more than my fair share in the will, but I'm trying to do what's best for Dad's legacy, for these properties, for all of us. This was the moment, the opportunity to confront her, to reveal what I knew, to explode her carefully constructed lies. But option 3 required patience, required letting her dig deeper. I appreciate that, and I want to help however I can. Despite everything, you're still my sister. This estate represents Dad's life work. We should honor that together. Relief washed across her face. She'd been worried I would be difficult, confrontational. Instead, I was being cooperative, conciliatory, exactly what she'd hoped for. I'm glad you feel that way, she said warmly, because there's actually something else I wanted to discuss, something more personal. Here it comes, whatever her real agenda was for this meeting. Preston and I have been talking about the future, about family. We're thinking about starting adoption proceedings. We've struggled with fertility issues. Her expression was vulnerable now, open. Having Dad's house, his estate, it would mean so much for providing stability for a child, for continuing the Hartwell legacy into the next generation. The manipulation was elegant. She was framing her inheritance theft as being about family, about children, about continuing our father's name, making any challenge to her actions seem like I was opposed to babies and family values. That's wonderful news about adoption, I said and meant it. Whatever Vanessa's flaws, a child deserves a loving home. When are you starting the process? Soon. But these things are expensive. Home studies, legal fees, agency costs. It could be $50,000 or more. She paused meaningfully. Which is why I'm hoping we can avoid expensive legal battles over the estate. Contested wills, forensic accountants, lawyers. That money could go towards building our family instead.
There it was, the real purpose of this meeting. She was worried I was going to contest the will, and she was preemptively trying to make such action seem cruel and selfish. I'm not interested in legal battles, I assured her. I just want to make sure everything's managed properly, that Dad's wishes are respected and his legacy is protected.
Of course, Vanessa agreed quickly. That's all I want to. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Vanessa thought she'd won this exchange. She'd assessed the threat level, presented her narrative, and gotten the response she wanted. Cooperation, not confrontation. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Torres. Your sister just sent me an email requesting I compile all unusual financial arrangements from the past year. She's building her case against me. What should I do? I silenced the phone without responding. Vanessa was already implementing her backup plan. If I started asking too many questions, she'd sacrifice Jennifer and claim the property manager had been acting independently. I should get going, I said, standing. I have physical therapy this afternoon. Vanessa stood as well, her expression sympathetic. How is the recovery going? I should have asked earlier. I'm sorry, that was thoughtless of me. It's fine, progressing well. The prosthetic is functional, and I'm adapting. Dad was so worried about you when he heard about the IED. He talked about it constantly those last weeks. Her voice caught slightly. He felt guilty that you were over there, injured, while he was here, dying. He wanted you home so badly. This part, at least, I believed was genuine. My father would have felt that guilt, would have struggled with the timing. He understood why I couldn't come back immediately, I said quietly. He always understood duty. He did, which is why I think he'd want us working together now, not fighting over money or properties, but preserving what he built. As she walked me to the door, she put her hand on my arm, a gesture of sisterly connection. Thank you for being reasonable about all this, Jules. I know the inheritance split isn't what you might have hoped for, but I promise I'll manage everything responsibly. Dad's legacy is safe with me. I looked at her directly, seeing both the sister I'd grown up with and the calculating opportunist she'd become. I'm counting on that, I said. Driving away from the estate, I felt the weight of the performance I'd just delivered. Playing naive, playing cooperative, playing the wounded veteran who just wanted family peace. Every word carefully calibrated, every response designed to lower her guard while gathering intelligence. I called Jennifer as soon as I was clear of the property. Compile exactly what she asked for, but make 2 versions. One that shows the arrangements as they currently appear in the system, another that shows the original lease terms before she modified them, plus documentation of when and how each modification was made. She'll only see the first version. Correct. Give her what she asked for, but preserve the evidence of her alterations. Time-stamped, backed up in multiple locations. Captain Hartwell, she's going to use this against me. She's going to claim I created these arrangements. I know. And when she does, we'll have proof that every single unusual financial arrangement was implemented after she became executor using her authorization codes during time periods when you were either on vacation or logged out of the system. I paused. Jennifer, I need you to trust me. Let her build her case. Every false accusation she makes, every piece of fabricated evidence, it just makes the eventual exposure more devastating. You're setting a trap. I'm documenting the truth, I corrected. She's the one walking into it. After hanging up, I made another call to a law firm in Atlanta that specialized in estate litigation in fraud cases. I didn't hire them yet, just scheduled a consultation for next week. When the time came to move, I wanted the best legal team available, already briefed on the situation. My phone rang. Uncle Robert. How'd it go with Vanessa? She's scared, trying to control the narrative, set up Jennifer Torres as a scapegoat, and emotionally manipulate me with adoption plans and family legacy talk. Did it work? She thinks it did. She believes I'm the cooperative younger sister who just wants family harmony. Robert chuckled darkly. Your father would have loved watching you work. He always said you had a strategic mind. But Jules, be careful. Vanessa's dangerous precisely because she's desperate. Desperate people make unpredictable moves. I'm counting on it, I replied. Every move she makes now is documented, witnessed, or both. She thinks she's covering her tracks. Actually, she's creating an evidence trail. When are you going to move? Not yet. I need more.
I need her to fully commit to the Jennifer Torres scapegoat strategy. I need documentation of her altering more records. I need her to feel completely safe, completely victorious. And then I'll introduce the evidence. All of it. The emails from Dad's files showing her manipulation, the financial records proving her fraud, the tenant testimonies, the property management documentation. Everything at once in a forum where she can't spin or manipulate. What forum? I'd been thinking about this since leaving the bank yesterday. A family meeting. All the relatives who were at the will reading. Mr. Patterson present as witness. Maybe even a court reporter to create an official record.
You're going to destroy her in front of the whole family. I'm going to reveal the truth in front of the whole family, I corrected. There's a difference. This isn't about destroying Vanessa. It's about preventing her from destroying Dad's legacy and hurting more innocent people. Robert was quiet for a moment. When you do this, there's no going back. Family relationships, holiday dinners, the illusion of unity, it all ends. It ended the moment she forged documents to steal from our dying father, I replied. I'm just making sure everyone sees what already happened. That evening, I compiled everything into a secure digital file. The bank documents confirming the Swiss account, my father's letter, his analysis of Vanessa's character, his predictions about her behavior. He'd known her so well, had understood exactly how she'd react to his death, to the inheritance, to the opportunity. He'd also trusted me to handle it correctly, not out of revenge or spite, but out of justice, out of a responsibility to protect his legacy and the people who depended on it. The revelation was coming, but not yet. Not until the trap was completely set, the evidence overwhelming, the escape routes closed. Vanessa thought she'd won. She thought she'd secured her inheritance, manipulated her sister, and prepared her scapegoat. She had no idea that every move she'd made had been predicted, documented, and was now being used to build the case that would bring her entire constructed reality crashing down. My father had taught me patience. The army had taught me strategy. And now, for the first time since returning from Afghanistan, I felt the clarity of purpose that came from a mission that mattered. The battle for justice was entering its final phase, and this time, the outcome was in no doubt. 4 days after my meeting with Vanessa, the pieces began falling into place exactly as I'd anticipated. Jennifer Torres sent me an encrypted email at 6:47 a.m. with the subject line, "She took the bait." I opened it at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside my laptop. Captain Hartwell, your sister requested the report on irregular lease arrangements yesterday afternoon. I provided it as discussed, including my notation expressing concern about the clauses and would like them reviewed by estate counsel. Make it clear that you're uncomfortable with them and don't understand their origin. Jennifer's response came quickly. Won't that make me look guilty? It will make you look like an honest property manager who discovered concerning arrangements and flagged them appropriately. When she accuses you of creating them, this contemporaneous documentation will prove you are actually trying to raise alarms about them. This is chess, not checkers, isn't it? This is warfare, I replied. And in warfare, the side with better intelligence usually wins. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing my father's letter again, studying his analysis of Vanessa's character, his predictions about her behavior. He'd known her so well, had understood exactly how she'd react to his death, to the inheritance, to the opportunity. He'd also trusted me to handle it correctly, not out of revenge or spite, but out of justice, out of a responsibility to protect his legacy and the people who depended on it. The revelation was coming, but not yet. Not until the trap was completely set, the evidence overwhelming, the escape routes closed. Vanessa thought she'd won. She thought she'd secured her inheritance, manipulated her sister, and prepared her scapegoat.
She had no idea that every move she'd made had been predicted, documented, and was now being used to build the case that would bring her entire constructed reality crashing down. My father had taught me patience. The army had taught me strategy. And now, for the first time since returning from Afghanistan, I felt the clarity of purpose that came from a mission that mattered. The battle for justice was entering its final phase, and this time, the outcome was in no doubt. 4 days after my meeting with Vanessa, the pieces began falling into place exactly as I'd anticipated. Jennifer Torres sent me an encrypted email at 6:47 a.m. with the subject line, "She took the bait." I opened it at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside my laptop. Captain Hartwell, your sister requested the report on irregular lease arrangements yesterday afternoon. I provided it as discussed, including my notation expressing concern about the clauses and requesting legal review. This morning at 6:15 a.m., she responded with a formal email copied to Mr. Patterson stating that she has serious concerns about my management practices and is launching an investigation into potential breach of fiduciary duty. She's demanding I provide all documents, all emails, all financial records, and all lease negotiations for the past 18 months. She also informed me I'm being placed on administrative review effective immediately and should not communicate directly with tenants without her approval. I'm attaching her email along with time-stamped system logs showing when each of those irregular arrangements was actually created, all within the past 4 months, all using her authorization codes, all during periods when I was either off-site or locked out of those specific files. She's making her move. What do I do now? I downloaded the attachments. Vanessa's email to Jennifer was a masterpiece of calculated accusation, expressing disappointment, citing specific lease clauses, questioning Jennifer's integrity, all while maintaining a veneer of reluctant duty. She was positioning herself as the responsible executor who discovered malfeasance and was taking appropriate action. The system logs told a different story. Every single fraudulent lease arrangement had been created using Vanessa's credentials, modified during specific time windows when Jennifer's access showed her logged out or working on completely different properties. The digital fingerprints were unmistakable. I responded to Jennifer, "Perfect. Do exactly as she requests. Provide every document, every email, every record she asks for. Be completely cooperative. Act concerned and confused. The more rope we give her, the more thoroughly she'll hang herself." I'm moving to the next phase. The next phase required careful coordination. I called Uncle Robert. "I need you to organize a family meeting. Make it seem like your idea, not mine. Tell everyone you're concerned about estate management and family unity. Get as many people there as were at the will reading. Aunt Diane, the cousins, everyone." When? 2 weeks from now. That gives Vanessa enough time to fully commit to the Jennifer Torres narrative, but not enough time to cause irreparable damage. What are you planning? A comprehensive presentation. Every piece of evidence, every document, every lie exposed in front of witnesses. I want Mr. Patterson there too. He needs to see what she manipulated him into facilitating.
Robert hesitated. "Jules, once you do this, there's no putting the family back together. You understand that. The family broke when Vanessa forged documents to steal from our dying father. I'm just making sure everyone knows it happened." He sighed heavily. "All right, I'll make the calls. But Jules, Vanessa's gonna fight back. She's not going to accept this quietly. I'm counting on it. Every defensive move she makes now just creates more evidence." That afternoon, I met with the law firm in Atlanta, Mitchell, Chen and Associates, specialists in estate fraud and elder abuse cases. The senior partner, Elizabeth Mitchell, was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that had seen every variation of family betrayal. I spent 3 hours walking her through the evidence.
The codicil executed while my father was impaired, the emails showing Vanessa's manipulation, the property fraud, the scapegoating of Jennifer Torres, the Swiss account my father had left me unknown to Vanessa. Elizabeth listened without interruption, taking meticulous notes. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen in 20 years of practice. Your father was remarkably prescient. He was a strategist. So am I. The question is, what outcome do you want? We could pursue criminal charges for elder fraud, financial exploitation, forgery. We could seek full invalidation of the codicil and redistribution of assets. We could file civil suits for damages to the estate caused by her property management schemes. She paused. Or we could use this evidence as leverage for a negotiated settlement. She returns everything, makes restitution, and we avoid the publicity and trauma of a trial. I'd been thinking about this question since fighting my father's letter. What did I actually want? I want accountability, I said finally. I want her stripped of executor status. I want Jennifer Torres exonerated. I want the tenants she defrauded made whole. I want our father's actual wishes honored, not the ones she manufactured. And I want it all documented in a way that prevents her from ever doing this again. That sounds like you want a trial. I want the truth established beyond dispute. If she's willing to accept that truth, acknowledge what she did, and make full restitution, then maybe we can avoid trial. But the accountability isn't negotiable. Elizabeth nodded slowly. All right, let's prepare for full litigation while leaving room for settlement if she comes to her senses. I'll need copies of everything, the bank documents, your father's letter, the property records, all of it. I'll have it to you by tomorrow. As I was leaving, Elizabeth stopped me. Captain Hartwell, I should warn you, cases like this destroy families. Even when you win legally, you lose relationships. Holidays become impossible, cousins take sides. Some people will believe her version regardless of evidence. Are you prepared for that? My sister destroyed this family when she chose fraud over integrity. I'm just making sure there are consequences. That evening, Vanessa called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Jules, I need to give you an update on the estate situation. Her voice was tense, controlled. I've discovered some serious irregularities in the property management. Jennifer Torres has been engaging in unauthorized arrangements with tenants, possibly for personal gain. That's concerning. What kind of arrangements? Consulting fees, service charges, things that aren't standard practice and that Dad never approved. I've placed her on administrative review while I investigate, but I wanted to keep you informed since this affects the estate value. The performance was flawless. She sounded like the responsible executor protecting family assets, not the fraudster covering her tracks. Should we involve lawyers? I asked, playing my role. I'm hoping it won't come to that. If Jennifer cooperates with the investigation and we can recover any misappropriated funds, we might be able to resolve this quietly. But Jules, this is going to take time and attention. I might need to make some executive decisions about the properties without consulting you on every detail. There it was, the real purpose of this call. She wanted carte blanche to make changes, destroy evidence, and consolidate her control while I was supposedly focused on the Jennifer Torres distraction. I trust your judgment, I said. Just keep me posted on anything major. Relief flooded her voice. Thank you. I know this is stressful, especially with everything else you're dealing with. How's the physical therapy going? We talked for another 10 minutes, superficial conversation about my recovery, her adoption plans, family matters. The whole time, I was making notes. Her tone when discussing Jennifer, her eagerness to get unrestricted authority, her assumption that I was too distracted by medical issues to pay close attention. After hanging up, I documented the entire conversation and sent the notes to Elizabeth Mitchell with a message. She's accelerating, moving to consolidate control under cover of the fabricated Jennifer Torres investigation. Recommend we accelerate our timeline as well. Elizabeth responded within an hour. Agreed. I'm filing a motion to remove her as executor and freeze all estate accounts pending investigation. We'll cite the evidence of fraud and request emergency relief. The hearing will likely be within 10 days. This was the moment. Once those legal papers were filed, Vanessa would know she was in serious trouble. The facade would crack. The real battle would begin. But I needed one more piece to fall into place first. I called Aunt Diane. We hadn't spoken since the will reading, and her voice was cautious when she answered. "Jules, I wondered when you'd call."
Aunt Diane, I need to ask you about the codicil you witnessed, the one changing Dad's will 6 weeks before he died. Vanessa said it was just a formality, that your father wanted to recognize her dedication, but that you'd still be treated fairly. Did you read the codicil before you signed as witness? No. Vanessa said it was standard language, that Mr. Patterson had prepared it. She just needed witnesses for the signature. Did Dad seem lucid when he signed it? He was tired, weak. He'd just had his afternoon medication. But he nodded when Vanessa explained what it was, and he signed it. After his medication, when the hospice notes show he was usually confused and disoriented. Jules, what are you saying? I'm saying Dad was manipulated into signing a document that gave Vanessa 70% of his estate while he was impaired. And I'm saying you were unknowingly used to make that manipulation appear legitimate. I heard her sharp intake of breath. That can't be right. Vanessa wouldn't. She did. And I can prove it. I have Dad's emails showing how she orchestrated the timing. I have medical records proving his impairment. I have evidence of everything she's done since he died, including fraud against the estate properties. Oh my God. Her voice was barely a whisper. Uncle Robert is organizing a family meeting in 2 weeks. I need you there. And, Aunt Diane, I need you to be prepared to tell the truth about what you witnessed that day, about Dad's condition, about what Vanessa told you, all of it. She's my niece. I've known her since she was born. And you've known me just as long. Who do you think is telling the truth? The line was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, I'll be at the meeting. And Jules, I'm sorry. I should have paid closer attention. I should have asked more questions. You were manipulated too. That's what Vanessa does. She manipulates people who trust her. After we hung up, I added Diane's testimony to my evidence file. A witness recanting, admitting she'd been misled, that would be powerful in court. The pieces were all in place now. Elizabeth Mitchell would file the emergency motion tomorrow. Uncle Robert was organizing the family meeting. Jennifer Torres was cooperating fully with Vanessa's fake investigation, creating more evidence of fraud with every interaction. Aunt Diane was prepared to testify truthfully about the codicil signing. And I had $67 million in undisclosed assets that would make Vanessa's inheritance grab look not just fraudulent, but pointless. That night, I reviewed my father's letter one final time. His words about letting Vanessa reveal her character, about fighting wisely, about the difference between revenge and justice. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would be exposing her maliciously, destroying her for the satisfaction of it. This was justice, methodical, documented, aimed at preventing harm and establishing truth. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. Captain Hartwell, this is Preston Whitmore, Vanessa's husband. We need to talk. Tomorrow, alone. This is important. Please don't tell Vanessa about this message. I stared at the screen. Preston, who'd witnessed the fraudulent codicil. Preston, who'd been conspicuously absent from most family interactions. Preston, who might know everything or nothing about his wife's crimes. This was either an opportunity or a trap. I responded, "Coffee shop on Bull Street, 10 a.m. His reply came immediately. "I'll be there. And, Captain, thank you. You're doing the right thing." I sat in the darkness of my apartment thinking about that last sentence. Preston knew. Somehow, he knew what I was planning. The question was, whose side was he on? Tomorrow would tell me whether I'd just gained an unexpected ally or whether Vanessa's reach was longer than I had calculated. Either way, the revelation was coming. The trap was set, the evidence was overwhelming. In 72 hours,
Elizabeth Mitchell would file the emergency motion. In 2 weeks, the family meeting would expose everything. And somewhere in between, I'd discover whether Preston Whitmore was another victim of Vanessa's manipulation or a co-conspirator in her fraud. The battle was accelerating, and for the first time since this began, I felt a small flutter of uncertainty. Not about the evidence, that was solid. Not about the justice of my cause, that was clear. But about what it would cost. About who else might get hurt in the aftermath. About whether exposing the truth was worth the destruction it would cause. Then I thought about my father, dying while his daughter manipulated him for money. I thought about Jennifer Torres being set up as a scapegoat. I thought about the tenants being extorted, the legacy being corrupted. The uncertainty vanished. Some battles had to be fought regardless of cost. This was one of them. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Preston and learn whether the enemy camp was fracturing, and then the final phase would begin. The revelation that would either restore justice or tear what remained of the Hartwell family apart forever. Probably both. The coffee shop on Bull Street was one of those historic Savannah establishments that had survived generations. Exposed brick walls, high tin ceilings, and the kind of worn wooden floors that creaked with authenticity. I arrived at 9:45 a.m., claiming a corner table with clear sight lines to both entrances and the street outside. Old habits from threat assessment training.
Preston Whitmore walked in at exactly 10 a.m. I'd only met him a handful of times, the wedding I'd missed, a few holiday gatherings before my final deployment. He was tall, with the careful grooming of a successful surgeon and the posture of someone who spent long hours in operating rooms. But today, his usual polished appearance was frayed around the edges. Dark circles under his eyes, tie slightly askew, the look of a man who hadn't been sleeping well. He ordered coffee at the counter, then approached my table with visible apprehension. "Captain Hartwell, thank you for meeting me." He sat without waiting for invitation, setting his cup down with hands that trembled slightly. "You said this was important." "It is." He glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. "I need to tell you what's been happening, what Vanessa's been doing, and I need your help." This wasn't what I'd expected. I'd prepared for confrontation, maybe attempted intimidation on Vanessa's behalf. Not this. "I'm listening." Preston took a long drink of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "I didn't know at first. When she asked me to witness your father's codicil, she told me it was just recognizing her caretaking role, minor adjustments. I'm a doctor, not a lawyer. I trusted her explanation. But you figured it out eventually. 3 weeks ago, she left her laptop open and I saw emails to Mr. Patterson discussing the actual distribution, 70-30. When I confronted her about it, she said your father had wanted it that way, that he'd been clear about it. But Jules, he met my eyes directly. I'd visited Richard during his final months. I saw his cognitive state, the confusion, the medication effects. I know what capacity looks like, and he didn't have it when that document was signed. Why didn't you say something at the will reading? Shame crossed his face. Because I'm complicit. My signature is on that document. If it's challenged, I could lose my medical license for participating in elder fraud, even unknowingly. The medical board doesn't look kindly on doctors who witness potentially coerced legal documents. So you stayed quiet to protect yourself. Yes, the admission was raw, honest. And I've hated myself for it every day since. But that's not even the worst part. He pulled out his phone, navigating to a folder of screenshots. Last week, I discovered she's been systematically transferring money from the estate accounts to personal accounts she set up, small amounts spread across multiple transactions to avoid triggering bank alerts. Over $200,000 so far. He slid the phone across to me. The screenshots showed bank transfers, each under $10,000, all flowing from estate accounts to accounts in Vanessa's name only, not joint accounts with Preston. Secret accounts. She's stealing directly from the estate now, I said, photographing each screen with my own phone.
That's not all. She's been pressuring the property tenants. I overheard phone calls, threatening non-renewal unless they agreed to these fee arrangements. One tenant, the Italian restaurant owner, called the house trying to reach her. When I answered, he was desperate, almost in tears, said he couldn't afford what she was demanding but couldn't risk losing his lease either. Marco. I'd spoken with him. His desperation had been real. Why are you telling me this now? Preston's composure cracked. Because she's escalating. Last night, she was on the phone with someone, I don't know who, discussing handling the Jennifer Torres problem permanently. She was talking about fabricating evidence, maybe even filing criminal charges for embezzlement. Jules, she's willing to destroy an innocent woman to cover her own crimes. And you're worried you'll be implicated. I'm worried I already am, he said flatly. My name is on that codicil. I'm her husband. Community property laws mean I've benefited from her fraud, and I'm terrified that if this all comes out, I'll lose everything. My practice, my reputation, maybe even face criminal charges. I studied him carefully. This could still be an act, Vanessa sending him to discover what I knew, to assess the threat level. But the fear in his eyes seemed genuine. So did the shame. What do you want from me? I want to cooperate, fully. I'll testify about the codicil signing, about Richard's mental state, about everything I've witnessed. I'll provide these financial records and any other documentation I can access. In exchange, I'm hoping you'll work with me to minimize my criminal exposure. You want immunity. I want to not go to prison for something my wife manipulated me into. His voice rose slightly. Then he caught himself, lowering it again. I'm a surgeon, Jules. I save lives. That's all I've ever wanted to do. I didn't sign up for fraud and elder abuse. I just loved the wrong person. There was something deeply sad about that last sentence. Preston wasn't evil. He was weak. He let love and trust blind him to what his wife was becoming, and now he was desperately trying to jump off a sinking ship. I'm working with a law firm, Mitchell, Chen and Associates in Atlanta. Elizabeth Mitchell is the lead attorney. I'll connect you with her. But Preston, if you're lying, if this is some scheme Vanessa concocted to infiltrate my legal strategy, it will only make things worse for both of you. I'm not lying. He pulled out a USB drive from his pocket. This has copies of everything on Vanessa's laptop that I could access. Financial records, emails, documents about the property schemes. I don't know if it's all admissible in court, but it's the truth. I took the USB drive, feeling its weight. If this was genuine, it was devastating evidence. Direct access to Vanessa's planning, her communications, her financial crimes.
There's something else you should know, Preston continued. The adoption story. That's real. We are pursuing adoption, but Vanessa's motivation isn't what she told you. She thinks having a child will make her more sympathetic if this ever goes to court, make her look like the devoted daughter and future mother, not the calculating fraudster. Even something as profound as adopting a child had been weaponized as part of her strategy? When did you realize who you'd married? I asked quietly. Preston stared into his coffee. Gradually, little things that didn't add up. The way she talked about her coworkers at PharmaCorp, always positioning, always calculating. The way she manipulated family dynamics, playing people against each other. I told myself it was just professional competitiveness, that she was ambitious but good-hearted. He looked up. Your father's illness showed me the truth. She wasn't caring for him out of love. She was positioning herself for inheritance. And I stayed silent because confronting it would mean admitting I'd married someone I didn't really know. What happens to your marriage after this? It's over. It has to be. I can't be married to someone who'd destroy innocent people to cover up fraud. I've already consulted a divorce attorney. Once your legal action moves forward, I'm filing. We sat in silence for a moment. Preston Whitmore had come to this meeting expecting judgment, condemnation. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. He was another victim of Vanessa's manipulation, just in a different way than Jennifer Torres or my father. I'll have my attorney contact you today. Be prepared to give a full deposition. And Preston, from this moment forward, you need to be extremely careful around Vanessa. If she suspects you're cooperating with me, I don't know what she might do. Neither do I, he admitted. That's what scares me most. I don't know my own wife anymore. After Preston left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour reviewing the contents of the USB drive on my laptop. It was all there. Everything he'd promised and more. Emails where Vanessa discussed her strategy with Mr. Patterson, spreadsheets tracking the money she'd siphoned from estate accounts, even a document titled Torres Problem, Options, that outlined plans to frame Jennifer for embezzlement. She'd documented her own crimes with the same meticulous attention to detail our father had used to document legitimate business dealings. The arrogance was stunning. I called Elizabeth Mitchell immediately. I just acquired significant new evidence, and we have a cooperating witness, Vanessa's husband. Preston Whitmore is willing to testify? Elizabeth's surprise was evident. That changes everything. A spouse testifying against their partner is incredibly powerful. He's motivated by self-preservation, not righteousness. But his testimony about the codicil signing will be devastating. He's a physician. He can speak credibly about my father's capacity. Get him to my office today, if possible. I want a full deposition before he changes his mind or Vanessa figures out what he's doing. Already planned. But Elizabeth, we need to accelerate the timeline. Vanessa's escalating. She's actively working to frame Jennifer Torres for criminal embezzlement. We can't wait 2 more weeks for the family meeting. I can file the emergency motion today. We'll request an expedited hearing, probably within 72 hours. In the meantime, I'll seek a temporary restraining order preventing her from making any financial transactions or property decisions. Do it. And one more thing. I want to be present when she's served with the papers. I want to see her face when she realizes what's happening. Elizabeth paused. That's unusual. Most people want distance from that moment. I'm not most people. I've been building this case for weeks. I want to watch her world collapse. I'll arrange it. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the explosion that was coming. I called Uncle Robert to update him. Preston Whitmore is cooperating? Robert's astonishment was complete. Jules, this is huge. A spouse's testimony? Destroys any claims that I'm just a bitter sister making false accusations. Preston witnessed the codicil signing. He's seen the financial crimes. He has direct access to her planning documents. When do you move? Elizabeth files tomorrow morning. Vanessa gets served tomorrow afternoon. And by tomorrow evening, her authority over the estate will be frozen, and she'll know she's facing serious legal consequences. She's going to fight back hard. I'm counting on it. Every defense she mounts, every lie she tells, it just gives us more evidence of consciousness of guilt. That evening, I met with Jennifer Torres one last time before everything broke open. Captain Hartwell, I have to tell you, your sister has been relentless. She's demanded copies of every email I've ever sent, every phone call log, every meeting note. She's building a massive file to use against me. I know, and when she presents that file in court, we'll present our file showing that every single piece of evidence she's compiled is either taken out of context or outright fabricated, plus Preston's testimony, plus the system logs, plus everything else. Jennifer's relief was visible. I've been terrified, watching her construct this case against me, knowing I might end up criminally charged. You won't. By this time tomorrow, she'll be the one facing charges. And Jennifer, after this is over, I want you to continue managing the properties. You've been loyal to my father's vision for 15 years. That loyalty deserves to be rewarded, not punished. After Jennifer left, I returned to my apartment and opened the file containing my father's letter one more time. I'd read it dozens of times now, but tonight, certain passages struck me differently.
Use it to set things right. Not out of revenge, but out of justice. You were always the daughter who understood the difference between those two things. Was I doing this out of justice? Or had some part of me been consumed by the need for revenge, for vindication, for watching Vanessa suffer the way she'd made others suffer? I examined my motivations honestly. Yes, there was satisfaction in the coming confrontation. Yes, I would take some dark pleasure in watching her carefully constructed lies collapse. But underneath that, the core motivation remained solid. Protecting my father's legacy, defending innocent people like Jennifer and Marco, and ensuring Vanessa faced consequences that would prevent her from hurting others in the future. Justice could include elements of satisfaction without becoming revenge. The distinction lay in the ultimate goal, restoration versus destruction. My phone buzzed. A text from Elizabeth Mitchell. Motion filed. Process server scheduled for 3 p.m. tomorrow at the Riverside estate. I'll be present. So will a paralegal to witness. You're sure you want to be there? Absolutely certain, I typed back. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., Vanessa would answer her door expecting perhaps a delivery, a neighbor, anything ordinary. Instead, she'd receive legal papers that would shatter her sense of control and security. And I would be there to watch the moment when she finally understood that the younger sister she dismissed and underestimated had been systematically dismantling her empire from the inside. The thought should have brought pure satisfaction. Instead, it brought a complex mixture of anticipation, sorrow for what our family had become, and grim determination to see this through to the end. At midnight, I stood at my apartment window, looking out over Savannah's historic district. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was sleeping in the house she'd secured through fraud, probably dreaming of adoption plans and continued control over the estate, confident in her victory. She had no idea that her world would end in 15 hours. No idea that her husband had betrayed her, that her scapegoat had maintained perfect documentation, that the sister she discounted was holding evidence of crimes that could send her to prison. The trap was set. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were prepared. Tomorrow, the revelation would finally come. And with it, the justice my father had carefully planned and I had methodically executed. I thought about sending Vanessa one final text, something cryptic that she'd only understand in hindsight. But that would be theatrical, unnecessary. The evidence would speak loudly enough. Instead, I went to bed early, setting my alarm for 0600 hours. Tomorrow would be a long day, a pivotal day. The day when the invisible empire my father had built would emerge into the light, and the false empire Vanessa had constructed would crumble into dust. Some battles are won before the first shot is fired. This was one of them. The outcome was already determined. Tomorrow would just make it official. The morning of the revelation began with mechanical precision. I woke at 600 hours, went through physical therapy exercises, dressed in my Class A uniform, the same one I'd worn to the will reading. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The wounded veteran, the decorated soldier standing against the sister who'd stolen from their dying father. At 1400 hours, I met Elizabeth Mitchell at her Atlanta office. She'd driven up from her firm's headquarters bringing 2 paralegals and enough documentation to fill 3 banker's boxes. Captain Hartwell, are you ready for this? I've been ready for weeks. She gestured to the conference room where Preston Whitmore sat, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. His deposition had taken 4 hours that morning, and the recording equipment was still set up. Dr. Whitmore's testimony is devastating, Elizabeth said quietly. He's confirmed everything. The timing of the codicil signing, your father's impaired state, Vanessa's manipulation, combined with the financial records and the evidence from her laptop, we have an airtight case. What about immunity for him? We're negotiating with the district attorney's office. Given his cooperation and lack of criminal intent, they're inclined to offer non-prosecution in exchange for testimony, but it's not finalized yet.
Preston looked up as we entered. Captain Hartwell, I meant what I said yesterday. I'm testifying to everything, regardless of the immunity question. It's the right thing to do. I nodded acknowledgement. Whatever Preston's motivations, fear, guilt, belated conscience, his testimony would be crucial. At 14:30 hours, we caravanned to Savannah. Elizabeth in her BMW, me following in my Honda, a process server named Marcus Reeves in his sedan. The plan was simple. Marcus would serve the papers, Elizabeth would be present as attorney of record, and I would observe as interested party. We arrived at the Riverside estate at 14:50 hours. Vanessa's Mercedes sat in the driveway, Preston's Lexus conspicuously absent. He'd taken the day off from his practice, claiming illness, and was currently at a hotel downtown. Marcus approached the front door at exactly 1500 hours. Elizabeth and I waited by her car, far enough back to be non-threatening, but close enough to witness everything. Vanessa answered the door in casual elegance. White linen dress, perfectly styled hair. She smiled at Marcus with polite curiosity. "Can I help you?" "Vanessa Hartwell Whitmore?" "Yes." "You've been served." He handed her the thick envelope of legal papers. "Emergency motion to remove you as estate executor, freeze all estate accounts, and initiate fraud investigation. You're required to appear in court in 72 hours. I watched her face as she processed this. The polite smile froze. Confusion flickered across her features, then comprehension, then something cold and calculating. Her eyes found me standing beside Elizabeth's car. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Two sisters, who'd once shared a childhood, now separated by an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal and justice. "Jules," she said my name like an accusation. "This is you."
I walked forward slowly, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. This is accountability. She looked down at the papers in her hands, flipping through them rapidly. I watched her face change as she read. The fraud allegations, the evidence citations, Preston's cooperation mentioned in footnote 17. "Preston?" Her voice was hollow. "Preston is testifying against me?" "He's testifying to the truth," I corrected. "About Dad's mental state when you had him sign the codicil. About the financial crimes. About all of it." Vanessa's composure shattered. "You have no idea what you've done. This family was broken the moment you forged documents to steal from our dying father," I interrupted. "I'm just making sure there are consequences." "Consequences?" Her voice rose. "You're going to destroy everything Dad built. The estate, the properties, his reputation." "I'm protecting what Dad built," I said quietly. "From you." Elizabeth stepped forward, her voice professional and firm. "Miss Whitmore, I'm Elizabeth Mitchell, representing Captain Hartwell. As of this moment, all estate accounts are frozen. You're prohibited from making any financial transactions, property decisions, or contacting any estate tenants. Violation of this order will result in immediate contempt charges." Vanessa stared at her, then back at me. "You can't do this. I'm the executor. The courts upheld Dad's will." "The courts upheld a fraudulent codicil executed while Dad was mentally impaired. We have his medical records. We have the hospice notes. We have emails showing how you timed the signing for maximum cognitive impairment. We have everything, Vanessa." "You're lying." But her voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone, navigating to the scanned documents. Dad's email to Patterson, July 5th. Quote, "Vanessa has been asking about revising the inheritance structure. I'm too tired to argue, but I don't understand why this is necessary." July 8th. Your email to Patterson. "I'll have Dad sign tomorrow afternoon after his morphine dose, when he's comfortable but still coherent enough for witnesses. Should I continue?" Her color drained from her face. "Or should we discuss the $200,000 you've siphoned from estate accounts into personal accounts under your name only? The fabricated charges against Jennifer Torres, the tenant extortion schemes?" I took a step closer. Dad knew, Vanessa. He saw what you were doing, and he documented everything. That's impossible. Dad was dying. He couldn't have... He was dying, but he was still brilliant, still strategic, still able to recognize when his daughter was betraying everything he'd taught us. I felt the weight of my father's letter in my pocket, though I didn't pull it out. He left me a letter. He explained why he'd set things up the way he did, why he wanted me to wait, to watch, to document. Vanessa's face twisted with something between rage and desperation. This is about the 70-30 split. You're destroying the family because you're greedy. This has nothing to do with money, I cut her off. I don't need your inheritance, Vanessa. I don't need Dad's visible estate. I have something far more valuable. His trust, his real legacy, and my integrity intact. She stared at me, trying to understand. Then recognition dawned. The Swiss account. You know about the Swiss account. I hadn't mentioned it specifically, but her reaction confirmed she'd suspected its existence. Dad told me about it during our last video call, 3 days before I was injured. He explained everything, why he'd established it, how he'd built it, and who he was leaving it to. How much? Her voice was barely a whisper. Enough that your inheritance theft is financially irrelevant. This was never about money for me. It's about justice, about protecting Dad's real legacy and the people you've hurt. Vanessa looked down at the legal papers again, her hands shaking now. You're going to testify? In court in front of everyone? I'm going to present evidence. Let the facts speak for themselves. And yes, in front of everyone. Family, attorneys, a judge, court reporters. Full transparency about what you did. This will destroy me, my reputation, my adoption application, everything. You destroyed yourself, I said flatly. I'm just making sure everyone sees what you chose to become. For a moment, I thought she might break down completely. Her face crumpled, tears forming. But then something hardened in her expression, a last resort of defiance. You think you've won. You think this is over? But Jules, I have resources too. I have attorneys. I'll fight this every step of the way. I'll expose your absence during Dad's final months, your choice of career over family, every sacrifice you didn't make. Please do, I replied calmly. Let's have that conversation in court. Let's discuss who made what sacrifices and for what reasons. Let's talk about duty, honor, service. Let's compare your choices to mine and see which ones history judges more favorably. Elizabeth cleared her throat. Miss Whitmore, I'd advise you to consult with legal counsel before making any public statements or taking any actions. The evidence against you is substantial. Your best option may be cooperation and restitution rather than litigation. Cooperation? Her voice laughed bitterly. You want me to just confess? Admit I manipulated Dad? Hand over everything I've worked for? We want you to tell the truth, I said. Acknowledge what you did, make restitution to the people you've harmed, face appropriate consequences. That's what Dad would have wanted. Accountability, not revenge. Don't tell me what Dad would have wanted. You weren't here. You don't know what those final months were like, watching him deteriorate, handling his care, dealing with the decisions.
You're right. I wasn't here. Because I was in a combat zone, treating casualties, serving my country, the same country Dad served in Vietnam. He understood that, even if you never did. We stood in silence for a long moment. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the porch. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the hour. Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice hollow. When's the hearing? Friday. 1,000 hours, Chatham County Superior Court, Judge Morrison presiding, Elizabeth answered. 3 days. Vanessa looked at the papers again. And if I don't fight this? If I cooperate? Then we work out restitution, you step down as executor, Jennifer Torres is exonerated, and we avoid criminal prosecution. You'd face civil penalties, but not prison time. And if I fight? Then we present all the evidence in open court.
Your emails, the financial records, Preston's testimony, everything. The district attorney will likely file criminal charges for elder fraud and embezzlement. You'll lose in court and face prison time. Vanessa closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet with tears. I never meant for it to go this far. At first, I just wanted recognition for the time I'd spent with Dad. Then the job loss happened, and I panicked, and everything just escalated. It was the first honest thing she'd said. Not an excuse, but an explanation. The slow slide from justification to rationalization to outright fraud. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking at me, "for all of it. For dismissing your service, for manipulating Dad, for the things I said at the will reading. Jules, I'm so sorry." I wanted to feel vindication at her apology. Instead, I felt only sadness for what we'd both lost. Not money or property, but the sister relationship that had died long before this confrontation. "I believe you're sorry now," I said quietly. "I don't know if you were sorry while you were doing it, but Vanessa, being sorry doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the harm. It just means you finally understand what you threw away." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "What happens next?" "You talk to a lawyer, a good one, not Mr. Patterson since he's compromised. You make a choice about how you want this to proceed. And in 3 days, we go to court and let the judge decide what justice looks like." Elizabeth handed Vanessa her business card. "My contact information. If you want to discuss settlement terms, have your attorney reach out. But Captain Hartwell is right. You need independent legal counsel immediately." As we turned to leave, Vanessa called out, "Jules, the Swiss account. How much did he leave you?" I looked back at her, this woman who'd once been my sister. Enough to know that Dad's real legacy wasn't in the properties or the visible wealth. It was in teaching us the difference between building something of value and just accumulating things. You learned one lesson, I learned the other. We left her standing on the porch of the estate she'd stolen, holding legal papers that would strip away her fraudulent authority and force her to face the consequences of her choices. In the car, Elizabeth was already on her phone with her office, discussing strategy for the hearing. But I sat quietly, watching the Riverside estate disappear in the rearview mirror, thinking about my father's letter and his faith that I would handle this correctly. I had executed his plan perfectly, patiently, strategically, decisively. I'd built an unassailable case, gathered overwhelming evidence, and positioned Vanessa with no escape route except truth and restitution. But the victory felt hollow. Not wrong, but incomplete. Justice had been served, but at the cost of what little remained of family bonds. My phone buzzed. Uncle Robert. "Jules? Vanessa just called me, crying. She said you served her with legal papers, that Preston is testifying against her, that everything is falling apart. What's happening?" The truth is coming out, finally and completely. Friday's hearing will make it official. She sounded destroyed, broken. She should. She earned that. Robert was quiet for a moment. "Your father would be proud of how you handled this, and heartbroken that it had to happen at all." "That's exactly how I feel," I admitted. After hanging up, I checked my messages. One from Jennifer Torres. "Captain, I just got a call from Vanessa's attorney. They're requesting a meeting to discuss settlement terms. I think she's giving up the fight." Another from Preston. "Vanessa knows I'm cooperating. She called me. It was difficult, but I'm not backing down. This is the right thing." The dominoes were falling. Vanessa's constructed reality was collapsing, and while justice was being served, I couldn't escape the awareness of the human cost. Broken marriages, fractured families, lives permanently altered. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the hearing strategy with Elizabeth over video call. She was optimistic about settlement. Most defendants fold when they realize the evidence is overwhelming. Vanessa's attorney will advise cooperation. By Friday, we might not even need a full hearing, just a settlement conference where she agrees to terms. And if she doesn't settle, Then we present all the evidence in open court. Your emails, the financial records, Preston's testimony, everything. The district attorney will likely file criminal charges for elder fraud and embezzlement. You'll lose in court and face prison time. After the call ended, I pulled out my father's letter one final time, reading his words about justice versus revenge, about fighting wisely, about being the daughter who understood the difference.
I'd done what he'd asked. I'd been patient, strategic, thorough. I'd let Vanessa reveal her character completely before acting. And now, 3 days before the hearing that would make everything official, I'd achieved what he'd planned for. But the cost weighed on me. Not regret. I'd make the same choices again, but recognition of the destruction that truth sometimes required. My phone rang. Vanessa. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Jules? Her voice was raw from crying. I want to settle. I want to make this right. Can we talk? Just us? No lawyers, no recordings. Sister to sister. I thought about my father's letter, about justice and mercy, about the difference between consequences and cruelty. Tomorrow morning, the coffee shop where I met Preston, 0900 hours. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me that chance. After hanging up, I wasn't sure if I'd just made a wise decision or a mistake, but justice required not just punishment, but the possibility of redemption, if the guilty party was genuinely willing to face their crimes and make restitution. Tomorrow would reveal which version of my sister would show up, the calculating manipulator or the broken woman who'd finally understood what she'd become. Either way, the revelation was complete. The evidence was overwhelming. The outcome was certain. Now came the hardest part, determining what mercy, if any, justice could accommodate. 6 months after the legal papers were served, I stood in the newly renovated community center on the east side of Savannah, watching 23 young women in military uniforms participate in a financial literacy workshop. The Hartwell Veterans Transition Fund had been operational for 3 months now, funded by a portion of the Swiss account and dedicated to helping female veterans navigate civilian life after service. The coffee shop meeting with Vanessa had been brief and painful. She'd arrived looking like she hadn't slept in days, makeup unable to fully conceal the evidence of prolonged crying. We'd sat across from each other in the same corner booth where I met Preston, 2 sisters separated by an ocean of betrayal. I'm not going to fight the motion, she'd said immediately. My attorney reviewed the evidence. He said fighting would be pointless and expensive, so I'm settling. What are the terms you're proposing? She'd slid a handwritten list across the table. I stepped down as executor immediately. Uncle Robert takes over. I return all money taken from estate accounts, $237,000 total. I make restitution to every tenant I defrauded, about $68,000. I publicly acknowledge the codicil was executed while Dad was impaired and shouldn't be enforced. The estate reverts to 50-50 distribution as originally written. I reviewed the list carefully. It was comprehensive, accounting for every fraudulent transaction we'd documented and several we hadn't yet discovered. What about Jennifer Torres? I publicly retract all allegations against her, written apology, letter to any professional organizations where I might have damaged her reputation. Vanessa's voice was hollow. She did nothing wrong. Everything was my doing. And Preston? The divorce papers were filed yesterday. He deserves better than what I became. She'd looked up then, her eyes red-rimmed. Jules, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to understand. I didn't start out planning to steal from Dad. It happened gradually. One small justification led to another, and before I realized it, I'd become someone I don't recognize. That's the thing about character. It's not built in grand moments. It's built in small choices, repeated over time. You made small choices toward dishonesty and self-interest. They accumulated into something monstrous. She'd nodded, accepting the judgment.
The settlement was formalized at the Friday hearing. Judge Morrison had reviewed the evidence, heard Preston's testimony, and accepted Vanessa's complete capitulation. The codicil was nullified. Vanessa was removed as executor. The estate accounts were unfrozen under Uncle Robert's management. Jennifer Torres was exonerated with prejudice, meaning Vanessa was prohibited from ever raising allegations against her again. The district attorney had agreed not to pursue criminal charges in exchange for full restitution and Vanessa's agreement to 5 years of supervised probation. One violation, any violation, and she'd face the original fraud and embezzlement charges. Vanessa had stood before the judge, read a prepared statement acknowledging her crimes, and formally apologized to the family, to Jennifer, to the tenants she'd defrauded. Her voice had broken multiple times. Whether from genuine remorse or fear of consequences, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. The family reaction had been predictably fractured. Aunt Diane had been horrified, apologizing repeatedly for her role in witnessing the fraudulent codicil. Uncle Robert had been vindicated in his suspicions, but saddened by the confirmation. The cousins had taken sides, some defending Vanessa as someone who'd made mistakes under stress, others condemning her actions as unforgivable betrayal.
There would be no more unified family gatherings. That illusion was permanently shattered. In the aftermath, I'd faced my own reckoning with what I'd done. Yes, I'd achieved justice. Yes, I'd protected my father's legacy and defended innocent people. But I'd also systematically destroyed my sister's life, her marriage, her reputation, her future prospects. The conversations with my VA therapist had been illuminating and difficult. You're struggling with the aftermath because you're a fundamentally decent person who had to do something that feels indecent, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo had explained during one session. You exposed truth that needed exposing, but you're not comfortable with the role of destroyer, even when destruction was necessary. Should I be comfortable with it? No. The fact that you're not is what separates justice from revenge. You did what needed to be done, but you're not celebrating the pain it caused. That's healthy. The Swiss account had enabled possibilities I'd never imagined. Beyond the Veterans Transition Fund, I'd established scholarships for military families, invested in small businesses in underserved communities, and created a foundation focused on elder care advocacy and fraud prevention. The money my father had quietly accumulated over 30 years was becoming a legacy far more meaningful than the properties and visible wealth Vanessa had fought over. Each dollar deployed strategically, each program carefully structured, each initiative designed for maximum positive impact. Uncle Robert had proven to be an excellent estate executor, managing the properties with integrity and implementing the transparent practices my father had always valued. Jennifer Torres continued as property manager, now with appropriate compensation and recognition. The tenants who'd been defrauded received full restitution plus damages. Marco Delgado, the Italian restaurant owner, had cried when I'd personally delivered his restitution check. Your father, he was good man. You are like him. You fix what is broken. I'd also used some of the funds to establish the Richard Hartwell Memorial Scholarship at the local community college, specifically for students pursuing nursing or emergency medical careers. The first recipient had been a young woman who'd served as an Army medic in Iraq. Her gratitude had reminded me why the battle had been worth fighting. Preston had reached out twice since the divorce was finalized. Once to thank me for the immunity agreement, once to tell me that he was joining Doctors Without Borders, leaving the country, leaving his practice, starting over somewhere his name wasn't associated with scandal. I need to rediscover who I am separate from her, and I need to do something meaningful with my skills, something that matters more than cardiac surgeries for wealthy patients. I understood completely. Sometimes redemption required radical change. As for Vanessa, I'd heard through family channels that she'd moved to Charleston, taken a job doing pharmaceutical sales training, a position that didn't require the same level of background clearance as her previous role. She lived quietly, kept to herself, complied meticulously with her probation terms. We hadn't spoken since the settlement hearing. I didn't know if we ever would again. The sister I grew up with no longer existed, if she ever truly had. And the woman she'd become was someone I couldn't trust and wasn't sure I could forgive. Maybe someday, but not yet. Now, watching these young women veterans learning about financial planning, investment strategies, and fraud prevention, I felt something close to peace. This was the legacy my father had wanted, not accumulated wealth sitting idle, but resources deployed to serve, to protect, to empower. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Torres. Captain Hartwell, the Historic Preservation Committee approved the River Street property renovation. Your father would be so proud of what you're building. Another message, this one from Uncle Robert. Jules, the final estate distribution is complete. Your 50% has been transferred. Also, I found something in your father's study, a letter addressed to you, dated the day before he died. I'm bringing it by your office tomorrow. A final letter. Even from beyond the grave, my father had known there would be more to say. That evening, I returned to my apartment. No longer the temporary VA-adjacent efficiency, but a proper home I'd purchased with my inheritance. The prosthetic leg leaned against the nightstand as I sat on the bed, reviewing the day's progress reports from the various foundation initiatives. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Jules? Vanessa's voice, tentative and uncertain. I know I have no right to call. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy, real therapy, not just to satisfy probation requirements, working through why I made the choices I made. I said nothing, letting her continue. My therapist asked me to write you a letter, not to send, just to process my thoughts. But I realized that hiding behind written words is what got me into this mess. So I'm calling instead, even though it terrifies me. She took a shaky breath. You were right about everything. About character being built in small choices. About me confusing accumulation with value. About choosing dishonesty over integrity at every turning point. Why are you calling me, Vanessa?
Because you deserve to hear that you were right to do what you did, that exposing the truth was the right choice, even though it destroyed me. Because if you hadn't stopped me, I would have kept going, kept hurting people, kept betraying everything Dad taught us. Her voice broke. You saved me from becoming something even worse than I already was. I thought about that. Whether justice that destroyed someone could simultaneously save them, whether accountability was its own form of mercy. I hope you find whatever you're looking for in Charleston, I said finally. I hope therapy helps. I hope you figure out who you want to be. Do you think there's any chance we could ever... She trailed off, unable to finish. Be sisters again? I don't know. Not now. Maybe never. But Vanessa, I don't hate you. I just can't trust you. And without trust, I don't know what relationship is possible. That's fair. More than fair. Jules, thank you for stopping me, for not destroying me completely when you could have, for being the person Dad believed you were. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about justice and mercy, about truth and cost, about the sister I'd lost and the father I honored. The next morning, Uncle Robert arrived at the foundation office with a weathered envelope. I found this tucked into his favorite book, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. He must have put it there knowing I'd find it eventually. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside, my father's handwriting. My dearest Jules, if you're reading this, then everything has unfolded as I anticipated. Vanessa revealed her character. You documented it thoroughly. Justice was served, though perhaps painfully. I'm writing this final letter because I know what you're feeling right now. The hollow victory, the burden of being right, the grief for relationships destroyed in service of truth. Here's what I need you to understand. You didn't destroy your sister. She destroyed herself through choices made repeatedly over time. You simply refused to enable or ignore that destruction.
There's a difference between causing harm and refusing to prevent it when prevention requires your own dishonesty. You chose truth. That choice had costs, but those costs aren't your fault. Build something beautiful with what I've left you, not monuments to wealth, but structures of service, not accumulation, but impact. You already understand this. I'm just reminding you when doubt inevitably comes. And Jules, about Vanessa, leave the door open, not for reconciliation on her terms, but for the possibility of redemption if she genuinely changes. Justice includes the possibility of transformation, not forgiveness without accountability, but hope that people can become better than their worst choices. You'll know if that time ever comes. Trust your judgment as I've always trusted it. I'm proud of you, my warrior daughter, not for the battles you've won, but for fighting them with honor. With all my love, always, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, feeling the weight of his final guidance. Leave the door open, not for reconciliation without change, but for the possibility that people could transform. That afternoon, I drafted a brief email to Vanessa. I received Dad's final letter today. He believed in the possibility of redemption through genuine change. I'm not ready for a relationship now, and I may never be, but I'm not closing the door permanently. If you do the work, real change, perhaps someday we can find a new definition of family. No promises, just possibility. J. 6 months later, the Hartwell Veterans Transition Fund held its first graduation ceremony. 23 women completed the program, each now employed or enrolled in further education, each equipped with skills and support to navigate civilian life successfully. I stood at the podium in my dress uniform, the bronze star catching the light, my prosthetic leg hidden beneath pressed trousers, and looked out at these women who'd served, sacrificed, and were now rebuilding their lives. My father taught me that true wealth isn't measured in properties or portfolios, it's measured in impact, in lives changed, opportunities created, service rendered. Each of you embodies that principle. You served in uniform, now you're building new forms of service in civilian life. That's the legacy that matters. In the audience, Uncle Robert beamed with pride. Jennifer Torres sat beside him, now serving on the Foundation's advisory board. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, my VA therapist, had come to support her patients who were program participants. And in the back row, almost hidden, sat Vanessa. She'd driven up from Charleston, sent me a text asking if she could attend, promising to leave immediately if I said no. I'd said yes. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of her efforts towards change. We didn't speak after the ceremony, but as she was leaving, she caught my eye across the crowded room. The look we exchanged contained volumes: grief for what was lost, recognition of what had been necessary, and perhaps the smallest glimmer of hope for what might eventually be possible. That evening, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the settlement. The headstone was simple, elegant: Richard Hartwell, veteran, builder, father. I did what you asked, I said quietly, standing in the twilight. I fought wisely. I chose justice over revenge. I built something meaningful with what you left me, and I left the door open for redemption. Though I don't know if Vanessa will ever walk through it. The wind rustled through the old oak trees surrounding the cemetery. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the hour. I miss you. I wish you were here to see this, to see what your invisible empire became when it finally emerged into light.
But he had seen it, in a way. He'd planned for it, prepared for it, trusted me to execute it. And in doing so, he'd given me something more valuable than $67 million. A roadmap for turning wealth into meaning, power into service, vindication into justice. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from the Foundation office. Another veteran had applied to the program, a combat medic from my old unit,
recently discharged after losing an arm in Syria. The work continued, the legacy expanded, and somewhere in the complicated intersection of justice and mercy, truth and family, destruction and redemption, I'd found my purpose. Not as the daughter who'd been dismissed and underestimated, not as the wounded warrior seeking validation, but as the architect of something my father had envisioned and I had built. An empire not of wealth, but of impact. Not invisible, but illuminated by service. The revelation was complete. The justice was served. And the legacy, the true legacy, was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.